Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Rookie 9 is protective of Naruto council bashing. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by ZaggertheBloodyAngel at AO3 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. I do not own Naruto. On top of the Hokage monument, more specifically on top of the Yondame's head was a young man around 18 years old looking at Konoha with blank eyes. Everything he wanted had been taken away from him in a painful way. Everyone in the Rookie 9 believed Naruto was the next in line to become Hokage, including Sasuke, who had been returned a year before after Naruto wiped the floor with him. Hell, even the elders Koharu and Homura had approved him for being the next in line. Of course Danzo didn't, but he just didn't like Naruto to begin with, as he didn't get his way to turn him into a weapon. But something happened that no one could predict. Tsunade, the woman he considered his sister, and quite possibly his mother, had announced Sakura as the next Hokage. Needless to say, everyone besides the pink-haired girl was pissed, yet if any of them tried to do anything to her, they found themselves locked in prison under Tsunade's orders. So, Hinata, Sasuke and Shikamaru were imprisoned because of this. On the first day of office, Sakura announced that Naruto was a Jinchuriki and even encouraged people to treat him badly. Needless to say, a few more assassination attempts were made and one nearly succeeded, and surprisingly it was Lee. The ones that didn't try anything on her did their best to protect Naruto and even attempted to convince him to go to Suna, but he had already lost his hope and just shook his head at them every time they tried to tell him to leave. Then Sakura did something that even some of the villagers questioned. She had ordered the execution of everyone but Sasuke, as she would be ousted if she offed the last Uchiha that treated Naruto like a human, as in her words, he was a vile beast that was no better than Kyuubi. If Kyuubi could have gotten free from its cage, it no doubly would have rent the girl asunder and then devoured her, but alas it wasn't. Even with the law, the Rookie 9, Guy's team, Shizune and the Suna trio still helped him. In response to this, Sakura ordered Choji, Ino, Shino, Shizune, Tenten and Temari to be executed immediately. In the end, Shino and Temari escaped with the help of Naruto intervening and left for Suna. Once Gaara heard this, he instantly declared war on Konoha, and oddly enough so did Iwa, but more than likely to get revenge for their defeat 2 decades ago. Somehow, Konoha managed to get Kiri and Kumo on their sides and started the next great shinobi war. Both sides were well matched, but the tide seemed to be turning against the rebellion's favor as they were being pushed back by the Konoha, Kiri and Kumo's forces. But in a bold move, they struck back with lethal force. They had taken Kiri out of the war by sending their Jinchuriki into Kurigakure and letting them go wild before they sent an invasion force in to finish them off. As news of this was heard, Konoha and Kumo were starting to be pushed back as they were outnumbered 4-1 due to Iwa's massive numbers and their lack of good shinobi, as most had sided with the rebellion. In a desperate attempt to regain control, they tried to bring Odo into the war, only for them to say fuck off, we don't want anything to do with this. After failing to get them to help, they launched a surprise attack on the rebellion force in hope to change the tide of the war. In a catastrophic battle, Gaara, Sasuke and Tenshi, the Gondame Tsuchikage and Jinchuriki of Shichibi, fell to Sakura, Tsunade and Yujito. Though they had won the small battle, Konoha suffered devastating losses and had no choice to retreat. As they returned to Konoha, they met a sight they would never believe they would see. Konoha was in ruins, and in the middle of it was an 8-tailed Naruto and a 5-tailed Kazekiri Kaisha, Jinchuriki of Gobi. After a short spout off by Tsunade and Sakura, Naruto and Kaisha went berserk and started slaughtering the Konoha shinobi, as if they were cattle. The ones remaining were the elites, Sakura, Tsunade and Yujito, though she was petrified beyond all fear, seeing the amount of killing intent and power being put out the 2 superior Jinchuriki. Just as they were recovering a battalion of shinobi from the Konoha rebels, Iwa and Suna surround them, but backed off, letting Naruto take his revenge on Tsunade and Sakura. Yujito, as she was now officially the Raikage, was the only one left standing and was forced to sign a treaty of neutrality along with the Mizukage, who was captured during the invasion. After they finished, the remainder of the Konoha rebellion went to fix their home after Koharu and Homura signed an alliance with Iwa and Suna. Naruto on the other hand went to where he always did, and that was where we found our young hero. He looked on as the Iwa shinobi helped started building homes for the homeless Konoha shinobi. He sighed deeply as he looked on, not sure what to do now. Almost all his precious people besides Kakashi, Kurenai, Temari and Shino had fallen in the war, and the ones that had survived fallen in love with each other. He did have one other, but he wasn't sure how she felt about him. Naruto. A soft voice came from behind him. He slowly turned around and saw Kaisha in her battle armor looking down at him with worry. He nodded at her slightly before scooting over a bit. She smiled and sat next to him and looked over the village she helped destroy. She didn't feel good about it, but they deserved it for what they did to him over the years. She sighed and looked over at him and blushed lightly. She had to admit she had fallen for him during the war and couldn't help but feel slightly giddy around him, even though her training from Tenchi said that love was something that was never meant for Jinchuriki, though before he died, he had given her his blessing. She just wished that she knew how Naruto felt about her. As the two sat quietly, Kaisha took a deep breath as it was now or never. Naruto. He turned towards her as she tried to find her voice. She really wanted to tell him, but she just couldn't find the courage to do it. It was odd, she could help destroy a village, but trying to tell someone she liked them was almost impossible. As she tried to regain her courage, Naruto looked at her oddly. Why does this seem familiar? Okay, let's see. Flushed cheeks, check. Loss of voice, check. Nervous beyond all reason, check. Oh my Kami. She's acting like Hinata. True as that was, Kaisha had finally regained her courage and looked him in the eye. Naruto, I think I like you. At this Naruto looked at her confused before it registered in his mind what she said. Suddenly, the little man in his mind that surrounded a nuclear reactor started running away screaming something about a meltdown. Aisha turned away from him, thinking he had rejected her as he hadn't answered yet, but in truth his brain was rebooting. She was about to get up and walk away when he placed a hand on her shoulder, making her look at him. He looked her in the eyes to see if she was telling the truth and couldn't see anything in them that told otherwise. Naruto smiled at her before speaking. Well, since you're being honest, he took a deep breath as it was hard for him as well. I like you as well, I was just too caught up in the war to say anything. Kaisha's eyes widened as she heard that and nearly passed out from the shock. Naruto noticed this and began to panic as he had enough of this with Hinata and still didn't know how to react to it. After a few moments, she managed to overcome her shock before hugging him tightly, much to his surprise. Thank you. That definitely was a reaction he was suspecting, but he couldn't help but chuckle as he lightly hugged her back. Realizing what she was doing, she pulled back and lightly blushed. Sorry, I just thought after so long that I would never. Naruto placed his finger on his lips. I know. I felt the same for a long time. I eventually gave up until I ran into you. For some reason I couldn't hold my emotionless mask around you. Just being around you made me feel something I hadn't felt before, not even my stupid crush on Sakura felt like how I did about you. This time Kaisha silenced Naruto by placing her finger on his mouth. Shush. I know. I've felt the same, but I can't explain it. Naruto smiled at her before he smirked playfully and bit her finger lightly. She yelped and glares at him before gaining the same smirk on her face as she tackled him. Of course Naruto wasn't prepared for this and knew he wasn't when Kaisha started tickling him all over. Trying not to laugh, he turned the tables by flipping her over and started repaying the favor. Unfortunately for Kaisha, she had no self-control and started laughing as he continued his assault. Of course she wasn't going to lie down and submit as she was the Jinchuriki of Gobi no Haku. So she started looking for a way out and grinned as she bit down on his neck. Naruto yelped as he stopped tickling her and she took her chance and pushed him off of her and ran up the cliff before running into the forest. Naruto smirked and chased after her and quickly caught up before pinning her to a tree. Both looked at each other while panting lightly before Naruto leaned in and kissed her on the lips. Kaisha was taken aback by this, but accepted easily as she started to kiss back. The two were lost in the moment as their hands trailed down the other's body and they deepened their kiss. They released their kiss to get some air before they locked lips once more. Kaisha began moaning as Naruto pushed his tongue into her mouth and wrapped her arms around his neck and dragged him to ground with her. After a little while and some teasing by both, Naruto pulled back before leaning against the tree, holding Kaisha tightly. She smiled as she snuggled up against him before looking up at him. Naruto-kun. He looked down at her with a smile on his face, but noticed her serious face. What's wrong? She shook her head at him. Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to know, will you come back to Iowa with me? He looked thoughtful at this. He really didn't know what to do. He had no love for Konoha after all the years, but it was still his home and leaving it wasn't something he was too fond of, even after destroying it. Yet, if he didn't, he knew she would go back to Iowa as it was her home and figured that they wouldn't let her leave the village without something in return. Looking at her face, all his worry washed away before nodding. I will go, though I'll have to explain to Himura and Kaheru why, but the old geezers will understand. They always do. She couldn't help but smile first before laughing as he had the gall to call the Konoha elders old geezers and was pretty sure he would call them that to their faces. He smiled at her laughter and sighed happily as she laid back against them. But as the old saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Movement from behind them alerted them to another presence. The both jumped up and looked around, only for their eyes widen as they noticed two people in black cloaks with red clouds scattered around it. Naruto gritted his teeth as he glared at the auburn-haired man with his face covered in piercings, as Kaisha did the same with the blue-haired woman. Naruto growled deeply as he glared at the former leader of Akatsuki as he glared right back. Pain didn't look much different than he did when they last met, except the scar on his closed right eye that was left there when Naruto's chakra claw ripped out his eye. Naruto was the first to speak as he growled out. Why are you here? Akatsuki has been disbanded for 2 years. Pain just looked at Naruto with no visible motion as he responded. True, but who said we were here for the Biju? I'm here for revenge for taking my eye. Naruto bit back a growl at that as he started flaring his chakra. So is that it then? Fine by me, let's finish what we started 2 years ago. With unreal speed Naruto's hand slipped into his pouches and threw 2 odd-looking kunai towards them. They dove out of the way as Naruto turned in a flash of yellow light and appeared where they were seconds before and grabbed his kunai before tossing them at Pain. He turned into another flash of light and kicked him in the stomach before disappearing again and delivering an axe kick, severing his head only for it to turn into another person. Naruto's eyes widened before he ducked below as a katana slashed where he stood. He rolled out of the way before pulling out more of the odd kunai and throwing them into the air and flashed through a few hand seals. Page kunai no jutsu. Suddenly the few kunai turned into a massive amount as they started to fall back down and embedded themselves into every nearby object. Pain's eyes widened before opening his right eye to reveal something that chilled Naruto to the bone. Itachi's Manjikyu. As quick as he saw it, the field was covered in black flames, destroying the kunaes to keep Naruto from gaining the upper hand. Naruto gritted his teeth as he was running short on his Hiraition kunai and knew without them, Pain was the better even after 2 years of training. Shit. I have no choice. Kaiu, give me as much as I can handle. From within Kyuubi grumbled about being ordered around, but did so as he had a modest respect of the flesh bag from over the years. Though he would still eat him if he ever could do it without killing himself. Red Yaki started pouring out and surrounded Naruto in the form of a giant fox with 8 tails. Over the course of the war, the Yondaime Tsuchikage, Kakashi, Gaara, Naruto himself and everyone that had decent knowledge of seals was called in to help activate the key the Yondaime Hokage left so that Naruto could use Kyuubi's Yaki without horrendous side effect like it did when he was 15. They succeeded, but it cost the Yondaime Tsuchikage's life. The only disadvantage about the unlocked Yaki was that he lost the almost impenetrable Yaki blood barrier. Though he still could make a barrier, it required almost total concentration and in a battle, that was something you were not given. He let out an earth-shattering roar before disappearing without a hint of where he went. Pain cursed as he jumped away from a claw swipe from Naruto that tore the ground asunder. Pain gritted his teeth and knowing that he was putting Konan in danger, he activated an ability of his Rinnegan Eye. Within moments, the sky suddenly was clouded over with storm clouds as rain began to fall from them. Naruto narrowed his eyes seeing this. He was no fool. Even with the Manjikyu, Pain couldn't track his movements, but with the rain pouring down, he would be able to with his Rinnegan. He growled deeply before rushing towards Naruto with impossible speeds. Pain barely managed to dodge the first swipe but couldn't dodge the second as the claw ripped through his cloak and left 3 shallow gashes on his chest. He tried to counter-attack, but Naruto was just too fast. After a few failed counter-attacks, Pain was on thin ice. Naruto had already caused severe damage and he knew a few more like that and it was over. As he managed to dodge another strike, he suddenly came up with an idea right as a chakra tail slapped her across the chest, sending him skidding across the ground. He slowly stood up and gritted his teeth as he waited for Naruto to get closer as he slowly started sending chakra to Manjikyu. Naruto didn't disappoint him as he tried to slice him. Amaterasu. Naruto's eyes widened as he heard this and focused everything he had on forming a barrier as the black flames engulfed him. From nearby, Pain heard Kaisha's scream in fear of what just happened as the flames burned Naruto's corpse. An uncharacteristic smile appeared on his face as he saw this and started to walk towards Konan, thinking it was done. Just then, the flames suddenly started to part way as Red Yaki pushed it away from its user. Pain's eyes widened as he turned around to see Naruto walking towards him through the black flames, as though nothing happened. He couldn't help but feel a sliver of fear as he saw this. Last time around, Naruto had gotten lucky as he caught Pain off guard and forced him to flee in defeat, even though he was clearly the stronger of the two. But this time it was different. Naruto was clearly the superior this time around even with his new eye. He turned towards the weary and battered Konan, knowing that he had to do with it as he looked at the girl to see her using Gobi's Yaki. Suddenly an idea struck him. If I can't be him, I'll just take away this girl. That's a fair trade for my eye. With that he suddenly rushed Kaisha to the surprise of all and pulled out his katana and struck her in the heart before she could react. The world began to crash down on him as he saw blood seeping from the wound and watched Kaisha from become limp. Naruto's heart stopped beating as she fell to the ground in slow motion. Every second seemed like an eternity as his eyes zoomed on her and nothing but her. Tears falling at a rapid pace as he fell to his knees. When her body hit the ground, something inside of him snapped as he screamed out loud in agony. The ground began shaking as the Yaki burst and swirled around him in a terrified display of power. The ground around him began to crack from the pressure of the Yaki before lifting giant pieces of solid ground. He continued screaming as the Yaki started levitating him. It continued lifting him till he was at least 10 meters in the air as an enormous burst of red chakra created a shock wave that was felt through most of the land of fire. The Yaoki started to form a giant fox with 9 tails waving madly behind it. It continued growing in size as the ever-increasing amount of chakra was pumped into it. Both Pain and Conan and the others that arrived when they felt the large amount of power being put could only watch in horror as Naruto was no longer visible as the chakra finally started coming to a halt. For the first time in 18 years, the full power of Kyuubi was unleashed in the form of a 40-meter-tall chakra fox. The eyes suddenly snapped open to show the pitch-black pits as they focused on the 2 former Akatsuki members. Even though they had heard of the power and the fear that the 9-tailed fox induced, they weren't prepared for anything like this, as it was just short of being able to kill without even having to lift a paw. Pain was unable to move as the fox suddenly pounced him with ungodly speed. In a split second, it was behind him as if it did nothing to him. A moment afterwards, blood started to seep from almost every inch of his body as he slid into thousands of pieces. Everyone couldn't help but be more petrified as they looked at the gory scene. The only ones not completely affected by it were the one that had been around during Kyuubi's attack 18 years ago. And even they were slightly petrified by the scene. The fox turned its eyes to the terrified Conan before phasing out. In second, Conan was no more than a gory mess of bloody goo as the 9-tailed fox had stomped her before walking over to the lifeless form of Kaisha. It laid down beside her and started to fade away. The killing intent was lifted on everyone there as it lessened till it came to stop. Once they all came to, they all saw Naruto holding on to Kaisha with a still flowing river of tears. As he cried, he heard a voice from within. "Kid. It's still possible to save her." Naruto's eyes widened as he heard this and didn't care if other people were around as he responded. "How?" The 9-tailed fox smirked as he saw this. "It's quite simple, kid. Using an ancient ritual, we can save her but with dire consequences." Naruto nodded with tears still following. "What do I have to do?" At this, the fox could help but be somewhat shocked. He's going to throw all caution to the wind just to save. "Shit, I could get him to free me like this, if it were possible." Shaking that off he spoke. "I will, kid, but you need to know the consequences first." Naruto nodded as he waited for Kyuubi to tell him. "This is a technique even forbidden by us unless the situation is dire, and I can say for what happened to you throughout your life, it is a time-traveling ritual." Naruto's eyes widened hearing this as his tears had stopped, but only because he had no more. Now the first problem with it is that it destroys the user body. Now in this case mine, but since I don't have a body we don't have to worry. The next is that you will inhabit the body of that time. So that means that everything you have worked for will be negated. You might have the knowledge, but either your body doesn't know how or cannot handle it at the time. So that means that Hiraishin will be unusable till you turn adolescent. Finally, the last problem. The timeline. Since you have knowledge of everything that can happen in the future, you can change it. But some events were meant to happen. Let's say if you keep Itachi from massacring his family, someone else will do it, traumatizing the breeding Uchiha you considered a brother. It doesn't mean you can't change them, just don't be surprised if they still happen. This also means that you can change the opinions of the big breast whore and her lesbo apprentice. Basically, you're getting a clean slate from the point of time you start in. So I change everything then alright, how do I do it? Naruto spoke with determination in his eyes as he looked down at Kaisha. Good. Now you're going to have to do this for her too so Gobi can't send her through time as well. She's still alive, but time is a factor here. Naruto nodded quickly as he listened to Kyuubi's instructions. Alright, the first thing you need to do is to slit an X pattern on both of your palms and do the same with hers. Naruto nodded as he pulled out a kunai and did as Kyuubi instructed, much to the confusion to everyone there, trying to figure out what was going on. Some wanted to intervene, but Kakashi and Kurenai kept them as they knew the relationship between Naruto and Kyuubi and whatever this was going to be big. Alright, now I want you to mix your blood with hers. Then after doing so, I want you to create the Exodus seal that I showed you a while back with your mixed blood. Then move her and yourself to the center of the seal. Naruto nodded and quickly made a level clearing and started making the seal that looked like a 6-point star within a double helix chain-like circle surrounded. Once he finished, he dried it using a fire jutsu like a blow dryer before placing himself and Kaisha in the very center of it. Okay, now just sit back and try not move much. This is Gobi and my part and it's going to hurt like hell. Naruto nodded lightly as he looked at Kaisha in his arms before closing his eyes and hoped that this would work. Red Yaoki began surrounding Naruto as green surrounded Kaisha. But instead of taking shape of the Biju as it normally did, it started to form a blackish sphere around them. As the Yaoki from both continued to increase, Naruto began to feel a stinging sensation throughout his whole body. It continued to grow every second and he bit his lip to keep from yelling as it was now felt like he was being stabbed by 1,000 white-hot kunais. Only his years of training and his iron will was the only thing keeping from writhing in pain as it continued growing as Gobi's yaki stopped, but Kyuubi's continued to increase. A few more moments, Naruto wasn't sure if he could out much longer as the pain searing through his body was unlike anything he had ever felt before. Finally, Kyuubi's yaki reached its peak as the sphere completely engulfed them and started to bubble as it slowly started to turn white. The sphere expanded as it grew brighter and brighter, making everyone nearby back up and look away from it as it was becoming blinding. It was that didn't were no longer able to see as the ball exploded in a massive wave of pure white light that was seen from miles away. A few moments later, everyone that wasn't permanently blinded was beginning to regain their vision. What they saw was an empty clearing with no sign of Naruto of Kaisha. The first person to speak was Tamari. What happened? Kakashi shook his head. I think Naruto's pulled another fast one on us to live up to his reputation as the #1 most surprising ninja. Aisha suddenly awoke and looked around to check out her surroundings. Her eyes widened seeing that she was in her room and she jumped up and ran to the mirror to see that she wasn't quite tall enough to see her reflection. She began panicking as she looked around for any clues to what happened and why was she here before a calm voice spoke from within her. Calm down, child. She suddenly stopped as she instantly recognized the voice of her tenant, Gobi no Haku. She took a deep breath to calm herself down, not to worry her father or her guard, which oddly enough felt like Tenshi. Gee Gobi. What's going on? I thought I died. She heard him sigh before speaking. You were on the verge of death, child. Kyuubi's vessel, Naruto I believe used an ancient ritual to send the user back in time, with Kyuubi's help. In addition, he mixed your blood with his and had Kyuubi tell me what to do. So in order to survive myself, I sent my yaki through you and sent you back in time as Kyuubi did the same with him. And don't worry, there was no mistakes, he is in this time period, just in Konoha. Aisha's face dimmed at that. I know there must be some way to get to him. Gobi stayed silent as he had heard what they had said and wanted the best for his container. Maybe I can convince Toussaint to let me go sightseeing and then sneak away from my guards and head to Konoha. That might work, but he might send Tenshi with me and there is no way I can shake him. Gobi continued to stay silent as he listened to his vessel's plans to leave Iwa and refrained from saying that he and Kyuubi already had came up with a plan for them. He had no love for this place, but he knew that Naruto for the most part didn't have much love for his home other than his precious people. After thinking a bit, she decided to get some sleep. She slipped into her bed and looked out of the window before sadly smiling. Naruto-kun. Don't worry. I'll find a way. She smiled a bit before curling up and falling asleep within moments. From outside, 16-year-old Tenshi was having a conversation with Shichibi. What do you mean she doesn't feel the same anymore? Kaisha-chan feels alright to me. He heard a growl of annoyance from the beaver-like creature from within him. You can be serious. Sure, she is physically the same, but try and feel her mental wave patterns. Tenshi twitched at this. If you haven't forgotten, I'm not telepathic like you are. From within he could feel Shichibi's sweat drop as he had forgotten. After a few seconds of recovering, it spoke up. Alright, you win on that. But something feels off about her. She feels older. Almost 10 years older at that. Jinchuriki narrowed his eyes at that. And what is that supposed to mean? Shichibi stayed quiet, making Tenshi believe he wasn't going to answer. Laying back against the wall, he tried to sense what was going on in the room and could feel that Kaisha was slightly distressed, but nothing was in the room besides herself. He narrowed his eyes and was about to enter the room to figure out what was wrong when Shichibi spoke up. I think I know what's different now. Tenshi twitched at this before sighing. Alright, tell me. The seven-tailed Bijuu sighed before answering him. I shouldn't be telling you as we swore that we would never use it unless drastic measures were needed, but I'm thinking this is what happened. Tenshi looked worried at that as he awaited Shichibi to tell him. The Bijuu sighed deeply before continuing. I believe her soul is from the future. At this Tenshi eyes widened. What? How is that possible? Shichibi flinched at this and shook his head as his ears were ringing. He sighed before answering. We have a ritual that can allow us to travel time, but it is quite costly as it destroys our bodies in the process. But if we are inside a vessel, it's a little different. It would allow us to send them back to a certain time and they would inhabit their body at the time. Tenshi still looked somewhat skeptical, but sensing the ever-changing mood of Kaisha from within, he was beginning to wonder. Alright, so say if they did. Why would she be acting like this? Shichibi mentally shrugged at him. Many possible reasons really. Anything from not remembering it happening, that she's in her old body or that she's searching for somebody, is the most likely though. He nodded his head at the first two, but the last one caught his attention. Searching for someone, what do you mean? Shichibi scoffed at him. Gobi was telling me what happened and the circumstances after I contacted him, trying to figure out what was going on. I seems that she's searching for someone she fell for. At this Tenshi narrowed his eyes. She fell for someone. Wait, what are the circumstances? Shichibi scoffed at him. So you believe me now? Tenshi narrowed his eyes at him. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Now tell me the circumstances. Shichibi shook his head. I cannot. If she wishes to tell you, she can. But no one else will. Now excuse me, I need some sleep. With that, Shichibi shut off the connection between the two, leaving a slightly pissed Jinchuriki muttering on what to do with his disobedient prisoner. He sighed before leaning up against the wall once more, feeling that Kaisha was asleep. He wondered on what Shichibi told him before sighing again. What the hell am I going to tell, Yandame-sama? Looking outside the window, Naruto was oddly quiet, which was unnerving Sarutobi to no end. What had him worried was that Naruto requested to leave the village earlier. He of course denied him as he was his guardian and didn't want Naruto to experience the real world yet. But the look in Naruto's eyes seemed to be nearly lifeless, which was scaring the old man to death. He had never seen Naruto look like this before and it was disturbing him greatly, and he began to rethink about letting him leave for a while, as he knew the boy needed. Sarutobi knew that Naruto hadn't had the best life in the village in his 9 years of life, and the academy wasn't going very well either, but he still worried about the boy he considered his second grandson. He sighed deeply as he made his decision. He was just now trying to figure out who to send with him. Should I send Kakashi? Nah, he wouldn't be someone to have around Naruto. He might get him hooked on Icha and with his mind, that could be a bad thing. Tenzo no. He would look after Naruto, but probably be a little overprotective and not give him some free space. Can't send Anko as he might not come back alive, as he does have a habit of pissing people off. Yugao is a possibility, and so is Itachi. Tough choice. After a few minutes of decided, he pressed a red button on his speaker. Kitetsu, can you send for Uchiha Itachi please? A crackle was heard on the speaker. Okay Hokage-sama. Sarutobi nodded as he looked over to the emotionless Naruto and sighed as he started signing the lessening mass of paperwork in front of him. After a few moments, a knock at the door was heard before Itachi walked into the room, looking somewhat confused as to why he was called. Looking around the room, he noticed a stoic Naruto. His eyes widened seeing that, but quickly schooled himself back into his stoic appearance, though his mind was running 100 miles per hour. Okay. Something's not right here. Naruto is always hyperactive and energetic, though he does shows a great deal of sadness every now and then when his mask cracks. So what is going to make him like this? Wait, this better not be what I think it is. As Sarutobi looked up from his paperwork. Morning Itachi-kun. Itachi just gave him the Uchiha death glare to get on with it. The old man sighed knowing Itachi had already figured this had something to do with Naruto and just decided to get it over with. Well, seeing as you have an idea of what's going on, I'm giving you a B-rank mission to escort, guard and teach Naruto a little bit as he wants some time away from the village. Naruto looked up at the old man and smiled a bit before shaking that off and returning to looking outside the window. Itachi didn't give any outward reaction, but inside he was nodding his head as he knew Naruto hadn't had the best life so far. Also, it gives me time away from father. I wonder why he's been acting so odd as of lately. Shaking that off, he looked over at Naruto before sighing. So all you want me to do is watch over him and spend some time outside the village and maybe teach him some things? Sarutobi nodded at him. Yes, that's all. The teenage Uchiha nodded before asking another question. So where does he want to go? Sarutobi didn't really know himself and turned to Naruto, how turned back to them and answer in an emotionless tone. The border towns around Iwa no Kuni. Both raised their eyebrows at this, but they shrugged it off as Naruto just wanting to get as far away as possible for a little while. Sarutobi turned towards Itachi. Well, do you accept? Itachi nodded at this and turned towards Naruto. Get your stuff packed and meet me at the main gate. Naruto nodded before walking outside the room as Itachi looked at Sarutobi strangely. Okay, why is Naruto acting so strangely? Sarutobi sighed as he looked out the window and towards the Hokage monument, more specifically the Yondaime. I don't know, but when he asked me to leave, he said he wanted to go to Iwa. I'm not sure what's going on, but it might have something to do with Kyuubi, which is why I assigned you instead of Tenzo. He could restrain Kyuubi's Yaki, but you can as well, though not to the same extent, and you can also go into his mind to figure out what is happening. Itachi nodded at that before looking out the window to see Naruto walk by the glaring villagers with absolutely no emotion on his face. He mentally cringed at that before mentally sighing. Alright, I'll take a look once we are far enough away. Sarutobi nodded at Itachi. That's all I ask. I just hope I'm wrong. The young Uchiha nodded before shoe-shining out to get packed. Sarutobi sighed as he looked at the paperwork in front of him before diligently working through them. I really wonder why I took this job at times. The Tsuchikage, Kazukiri Arashi was looking at his daughter, Kaisha, with a somewhat annoyed look on his face. Any reason you wanted to leave the village, Kaisha? Especially near the Hai no Kuni border at that, you know that we still harbor ill feelings towards Konoha. Aisha was trying to come up with something believable as she really doubted that her Tusan would believe that she was from the future and she was looking for someone, namely the son of the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Then she looked on oddly at Kaisha as she was thinking up something before mentally sighing. Okay Shichibi, you were right. You happy? In response he got a snort signifying that the giant badger-like creature didn't really care. I want to see what it's like at the border. Both Arashi and Tenchi twitched at the lame excuse as Kaisha smiled brightly at the two. Arashi looked over at Tenchi and sighed. Any other reason you wish to go, as I really don't see the point of going all the way out there just to see what it looks like. Tenchi had already explained what Shichibi had told him and was skeptical at first, but no, he was beginning to wonder if the damn thing was telling the truth. Hearing this, Kaisha began to mentally panic as that was the best thing she could come up with and was trying to come up with anything now. Both older males could see this and had to refrain from sweat dropping as her face was changing every few seconds to match what she was thinking. From within her, Gobi couldn't help but sweat drop at his tenant and was beginning to wonder if her mind was reverting to the way it was during this time period. Suddenly a smirk crossed her face, making everyone in the room including the two Biju pale as they knew what that smirk meant. It meant if you can't win with reason, go for volume. Why? I really want to go. Stop being so mean Tusan. Why Aya? Tenchi-kun. Please help me. Why? Everyone nearby couldn't help but hold their ears in pain as she faked crying and started increasing the volume of her voice by the second. Gobi started banging his head against the cage, wanting the torment to end as he had no way of blocking out the intense sound. Arashi was cringing as he covered his ears and noticed Tenchi twitching on the ground as he had somewhat heightened senses from Shichibi and was probably going deaf from her screaming. He had no choice but to give in cause at this rate. She was going to cause him to have more paperwork and a pair of broken eardrums. Alright. You can go. Just please stop crying. Kaisha instantly stopped hearing this and smiled brightly at him. Thank you Tusan. A sigh of relief was heard from everyone in the room and the ones outside it as well. Arashi sighed as he turned to the recovering Tenchi before looking back at Kaisha. On one condition though, Tenchi will be going with you. Kaisha grimaced at this, but she had expected it. Alright, let's go Tenchi-kun. Tenchi just nodded at her. Alright, go get ready. I'll meet you at the main gate in 30 minutes. She nodded as she rushed out of the room, trying to figure out a way to ditch him. Once she left, Tenchi turned towards the Tsuchikage, who had a look of concentration on his face. So, what do you think? Arashi shook his head, not sure himself. I'm not sure, but I think you and Shichibi are right. I could tell that she wasn't herself at times and seemed to act older than she is. Tenchi nodded as he had seen as much since she had woken up in the morning. And the reason she wants to go to the border disturbs me. It's as if she's expecting someone to be there. Tenchi nodded in agreement. Either that or she is planning on ditching me to cross the border as I can't cross without it being seen as an act of aggression. Arashi nodded as he knew that and really didn't want to have to deal with Konoha right now as they were both recovering from the war and attacks of different sorts that took the lives of the current cages of the time. He sighed as he looked out to the window and to his home to see Kaisha quickly packing her things in her room. Take good care of her for me. I can't feel but something is off on all this. Tenchi nodded at his statement. I will. She's like a sister to me, you know that. The Tsuchikage nodded as he sat down and looked down at the paperwork piling his desk and sighed. Alright, you can go. You're going to have your work cut out for you with the way she's acting. Tenchi nodded and shoeshined out of the room. Arashi sighed as he pulled out a pen and started working on the paperwork in front of him. I really wonder what made me take this job. After a few miles after leaving Konoha, Itachi was really wondering what was going on with Naruto. He was sure that Naruto's stoic mask would fall and he would start asking him to teach him so cool jutsus, but that wasn't the case as he just continued walking towards his destination. This worried the stoic Uchiha, but he didn't show it was ingrained into his head by his father that to show emotions was weakness. He absent-mindedly started to wonder if he had started teaching Naruto as he was giving him a run for his money. Naruto on the other hand was speaking to Kyuubi. So how am I going to find her Kyu? It's not like I can ditch him, he did kill his clan after all. Kyuubi sighed as he really wondered if Naruto had paid attention to his explanation beforehand. Look kid, it's simple. I told Gobi to take the girl to a border town and once he feels that we are close enough to flare his yaki and I'll do the same so you two can find each other. He nodded as it was a good plan but with one small problem. But we have to worry about Itachi. He can see chakra and yaki easily with the Sharingan and can even repress your yaki if need be. Kyuubi scoffed at that as he already thought ahead. Kid, I'm not stupid, I already knew that. All you have to do is put some distance between him and let me flare my yaki into your system. Once I've done so you'll be much faster, though probably not as fast as he is, but still you can buy some time as I look for the girl. He nodded in agreement as it seemed like a good plan that could work, though the eluding Itachi part seemed to be a problem, but he could do it. Hell, if he could evade the Anbu after he painted the Hokage monument, he could evade him for at least a little while. Alright, that will work. Just don't do it till I've gotten some distance from him. Kyuubi mentally nodded in confirmation before curling up and falling asleep as he was still tired from sending Naruto through time. Itachi watched Naruto as he was speaking to Kyuubi and narrowed his eyes as he seemed to be nodding as if he was agreeing with someone. He continued to watch Naruto and activated his Sharingan to see if there was any Yauki leaking into his system, well more than usual. After seeing it wasn't, Itachi looked thoughtful, trying to figure out what Naruto was doing when they arrived at a small town. He was slightly surprised that they reached here so quickly and had to think about continuing or stopping here for the day. Itachi didn't have to decide as Naruto continued walking through the town, not really caring that he was leaving the Uchiha prodigy behind. Itachi refrained from rushing over and strangling him as he followed Naruto out of the town. This had him worried even more. It was as if Naruto had been here before and knew exactly where to go as they made it through the town with ease. Having no choice, he continued following the young blonde as he seemed determined to reach his goal. Getting tired of being left out of the loop or the fact that he was getting slightly bored that there was nothing to do, he spoke up. Naruto. What's the rush? It's not like there is anything there anyways. Just relax and enjoy the scenery. Naruto winced as he realized that he was rushing. Damn it. I need to calm down, otherwise he's going to suspect something if he doesn't already. He nodded as he slowed down a bit. Itachi frowned a bit at this, but didn't say anything as he continued to look around, but was keeping a keen eye on Naruto, not liking what he had seen so far. It's as if he's expecting someone. But who? He doesn't know anyone outside the village. Damn it, things are getting complicated. I'll find out tonight anyhow, so no use worrying about it right now. He sighed a bit as he looked around the scenery and refrained from smiling. It feels good to get away from the pressure that Toussaint places on me. Though I hope Itato is doing okay. Aisha smiled as they walked through the town, looking at the things in the stores, trying to make it look like she was interested in them, while in reality she was trying to get to the border quickly so she could find Naruto. Tenchi had noticed this and really was beginning to wonder if she was just trying to make him believe that she wasn't up to something. Of course he wasn't falling for it as he could always read her like an open book. As she continued going through the stores, just looking at things, she began speaking to Gobi. How am I supposed to find Naruto once I sneak past Tenchi? Gobi sighed at her before answer. Well, once we are close enough the border, I'm going to search for Kyuubi's presence. If I can sense him, I'm going to flare some of my Yauki into you as he'll do the same with the boy and both of you will come searching for each other. The only problem is Tenchi as Shichibi will easily be able to tell what's going on. And more than likely Naruto will have to shake someone himself to get to you, so it's not going to be easy. I know the Gobi, but I don't care. I will find him, no matter what. Gobi couldn't help but smirk at his container as she said this, after all, it was one of the reasons that he liked her. Shaking his head, he responded. I know, but it's still going to be tough as shaking him is going to be nearly impossible unless you cross the border. She mentally nodded knowing this already, but didn't care as she was going to find a way to do it. Then she narrowed his eyes as he noticed Kaisha zoning out, meaning she was speaking to Gobi and couldn't help but feel paranoid that they were going to try something later on. And it doesn't help that I haven't had any sleep in the last 36 hours. Damn it, this is going to be hell. Ha. You giving in already? Tenchi twitched at that. And what does that mean? Shichibi smirked devilishly at him. I know you better than that. I know you feel more for her than just a sibling. Tenchi mentally raised his eyebrow, though he was actually worried too where this was going. I don't know what you're talking about. Shichibi just smirked at him. Oh really? Then I guess those dreams with you spilling your seed into every hole of an older version of Kaisha is just a phase then. Tenchi's eyes widened as he blushed slightly at that. Damn you. You've been looking through my dreams, asshole. Shichibi shrugged at him, not really caring. You would too if you were bored as I am. As Tenchi began arguing with Shichibi, Kaisha was done with her window shopping and staring at him expectantly. Of course he didn't notice this much to the irritation of his charge. She took a deep breath to the horror of Gobi and instantly caught the intention of Tenchi and Shichibi as they didn't want to be on the end of another ear-splitting screaming today. Alright. We're going. Kaisha smiled at him before turning around and heading out of town with him following, ignoring his tenant's urges to continue their argument to get more things out of him. He really did hate the way that he spilt everything to his demon when they argued, and it always turned out to bite him in the ass. One day I'm going to get something on you and make it come back to haunt you, asshole. Itachi sighed as he looked at the rising moon before looking down at the now sleeping Naruto. It had taken him to use a minor genjutsu to put him to sleep as he just didn't seem to be tired. And it wasn't helping that he somehow knew the balancing leaf chakra control exercise he tried to teach him. That one hit him stumped. That wasn't taught till the second year, well the first was just getting them adjusted to using chakra and to teach them the basic on how to use it. What startled him wasn't that Naruto seemed to already know how to do the exercises, but the fact that he had already mastered it and was moving up to tree climbing and even more, that he could use Kawarimi and a very perverted version of the hinge. If it wasn't for his extreme control he would have flown back with a nosebleed at that. The hinge didn't surprise him as it was a simple jutsu that was taught during the first year, but Kawarimi did. That was usually taught till the last year as it was the more complicated of the 3 academy jutsus. Though he wasn't surprised that Naruto couldn't do a bunshin. Hell, with the amount of chakra he had, he would need near medic nin control to perform just one. That was something that had him wondering as to pass the genin exam, you had to know it, the only exception would be Rock Lee in 2 years as he couldn't use chakra. That was another thing that bothered him. Sure, he knew Naruto was Kyuubi's container, but the amount of chakra he had was unnatural even for a Jinchuriki. It was close to that of Katetsu and Izumo's combined. Now given that wasn't anywhere near his capacity, but it was still slightly frightening that he had that much. Hell, he was sure that in a few years that Naruto might surpass himself in capacity, which was a scary thought as he had the 3rd highest capacity in Konoha behind Jiraiya and the Hokage himself and was equal to that of Hada Kakashi, though he would soon surpass him. He sighed as he shook his head and looked at Naruto and walked over to him. He knelt down and activated his Sharingan before placing his hand on Naruto's forehead. With a quick spin of his Tomo, he found himself inside a sewer. Itachi grimaced at this and started to look around to try and figure out where to go. He quickly found the pipes which he assumed to be his chakra cords and started to follow them to meet Kyuubi, as he was pretty sure Naruto's change had something to do with him anyways. As he followed the pipes, he began to hear growling that grew louder as he continued following the pipes. That confirmed that he was going in the right direction as he found himself in a large square room with the floor covered in water. The wall at the back of the room wasn't a wall, but large iron bars that looked to be a cage. He walked up calmly towards the cage until he was a few meters away from it as he didn't want to get too close and get sliced in two by the creature he saw in the back. Its eyes snapped open showing its crimson fury as it looked at the middle-aged teen in front of him. He backed up in fear as he had never felt this much killing intent before and was slightly glad he was too young to face it years ago as he would have soiled his pants. The kid soon smirked seeing this before speaking. "Why does another lowly Uchiha enter my domain?" Kyuubi said, trying to give Itachi a hint of what was going on without coming out and saying it. After all he had his image to hold up to. Of course, Itachi didn't get it. He was still too scared and that made his brain not function as it should. "Another Uchiha, do you mean another has been in here recently?" Kyuubi refrained from sighing in annoyance and decided to try and swipe at Itachi, only for the bars to stop him, much to the relief of the teen. No. A few years ago. One with raven-colored hair and clouded vision. This really confused him. The only clan members he knew that had raven-colored hair other than himself was his mother, Shusui and Sasuke, and all three of them didn't even have their Sharingan at the level needed to enter a mind or hadn't even activated it as in Sasuke's case. Of course, Kyuubi noticed this and couldn't help but bang his head against the cage bars, scaring the shit out of Itachi without meaning to. After recompassing himself right after checking his pants, the Uchiha prodigy looked up at the mighty Kitsune and spoke up. "What are you doing to Naruto?" The fox sighed out loud, which sounded like a menacing growl to Itachi, before answering. "Nothing. Just look through the kid's memories and all will be understood." Itachi narrowed his eyes at the Kitsune in front of him and was about to walk off to search for them when the Kitsune spoke again. "Take the left tunnel and turn to the right. Go all the way down it and there will be a large metal door at the very end." That is his memories. Itachi once again narrowed his eyes but followed the fox's instructions and found himself at the said door. Opening it with caution, he looked in to see a pitch-white hallway with many doors inside it. Seeing it was his memories, he walked inside it and took a look at the doors. "Alright. Now where to start?" "Start with the first one and go through all of them," spoke a voice behind him. Itachi whirled around and his eyes widened as he was looking at a Yondaime duplication with 6 whisker marks. "Who are you?" Naruto shook his head at him. "All will be explained once you take a look through my memories." At this Itachi eyes widened. "Why your memories end there?" "Yes, it's me. All will be explained if you just look through them." Itachi could only nod as he had no clue what was going on before he turned towards the first door. "Before you do though, you need to be prepared for what you will be seeing." Itachi nodded as he let Naruto continue. "Each door has multiple colors. Each has their own meaning. Red means anger, sky blue is sadness, dark to navy blue is depressed, pink is love, yellow is happiness, gray is neutral, and black is a tragedy or a devastating event. You don't have to worry about other colors, that's all you will be seeing in my mind." Itachi nodded numbly as he looked around. "Oh shit, most of them are dark blue, light blue and gray. This isn't going to be fun." He shook that off as he tried to open the first door and got shocked in response. He jumped back and looked at Naruto, who shook his head. "It seems I have to go with you. Must be a defense I get from the seal." The Uchiha prodigy nodded as he looked carefully at the first door. It was mostly dark blue, with some gray, red and light blue streaks through it. He cringed as he had a bad feeling most of the doors were going to be like this. Naruto opened it and nodded for him to go through. Itachi did so and watched Naruto's first memory. He was stunned that Naruto could remember this far back, as he was only 4 and he was cornered by some drunk villagers who beat him senseless and left him once they were done. It wasn't the worst beating he had, but it was the first, and those always leave lasting impressions. Naruto continued leading him through his memories. For the first couple dozen they were all just beatings and glares from the villagers when he was around 5. The next door, however, was black, making Itachi cringe as he had a feeling what this one was, as he would never forget that night. Itachi hated that he was right and saw Naruto being burned at a stake while being used for target practice by a few drunken shinobi. His anger boiled as they continued to repeatedly put out the fire and relight it just to torture him. Then they finally put it out, and one pulled his zipper and moved behind Naruto and was about to force himself on him, but that's when he arrived in the memory. A slight teardrop fell from Itachi's right eye as he watched himself slaughter the drunk shinobi before taking Naruto to the hospital. He could never forget that memory as the stench of burned flesh was burnt into his nose. After that memory, most doors were gray with some yellow, as they were just him in the hospital getting visited by Sarutobi, Tenzo, Kakashi, himself, a few Anbu he couldn't recognize, and he even swore he saw Jiraiya in the background a few times. Then they turned to light blue, as most of them were just villagers just glaring at him, not wanting to end up like the shinobi that attacked him or to anger his Anbu guard watching him from above, ready to execute Sandame's law at any second. Then came his first pink door, and as he guessed, it was the day he was introduced to ramen. Itachi had to laugh at this, as it was a comical scene to watch Naruto devour the ramen at an unhealthy pace after he checked to make sure it was safe. He couldn't help but smile at the man, Tucci, and his daughter, Am. He made a mental note to visit the stand and talk with her once they returned. After that their doors would alternate between yellow or pink and light blue and dark blue as he visited the ramen stand or was kicked out of other stores trying to get groceries, and a few Naruto would just vacantly sit in the corner and cry as his Anbu guard went to get his groceries as they saw what he got. The next door was the first navy blue one with some yellow in it. This was one that shocked Itachi to the core, as it was the first time Naruto had given up and tried to commit suicide, only for an Anbu, who he knew was Kakashi, stopped him from slitting his wrist. Afterwards, Kakashi had sat down and talked with Naruto about how the death of his teammates and his sensei nearly drove him over the edge, but he managed to overcome it, knowing that they wanted him to live, and explained to him that his parents wouldn't want him to. Itachi cursed at him for carefully omitting the fact that he knew who his parents were, as he was curious to know who they were himself. Naruto rolled his eyes as they continued through his memories. The light blues began to fade away, but were still there every now and then, as Naruto adopted his happy-go-lucky mask. The Uchiha prodigy cringed at this, forgetting it was a mask. Well, partial mask, as he knew that a good part of it was how Naruto actually acted. They started going through his first year of the academy memories, making Itachi narrow his eyes, as he knew that he was 9 in the memories, but he could see many doors were left. This made him turn to Naruto, how only told him to continue watching, and everything would be explained. Eyeing that, he continued watching the memories on how Mizuki treated him badly, and Iruka really didn't care at first, but was slowly started warming up to him. As they continued through his memories, they passed the date it was today, and nothing about it was like how it went. This made Itachi narrow his eyes and look at Naruto as they continue forward. In the next couple of days, he noticed Sasuke was absent and started listening to the kids talking about something. Sending chakra to his ears, he could hear them clear as day. "Didn't you hear Sakura?" Apparently Sasuke's brother went psycho. Ino said, looking somewhat grim. "Yeah, I heard he murdered everyone in the district before used some sort of genjutsu to torture his little brother." Kiba spoke, shivering at the last part. Itachi's eyes widened as his heart began to thump faster as he continued to listen to them. "Really? How awful." Sakura said solemnly. "Yeah, it was. I just wish there was something we could do for him." Ino said sadly. "Depressing, isn't it?" Came Naruto's voice behind him as the memory faded. Itachi turned to him with tears building in his eyes, not sure what to believe. Naruto looked at him before closing his eyes. "As I said before, once you reach the end, everything will be explained. Till then, I will not answer any of your questions." He could only nod numbly as he followed Naruto through the next door, not really paying attention as they were just more of the first-year academy and how all the kids treated him like dirt. He watched the rest of the academy memories and closely observed Sasuke, who seemed to change from the happy yet slightly sad boy he knew to a cold, stoic avenger hell-bent on revenge. He cringed at this and couldn't help but feel partially responsible for it, even though these events hadn't even happened. After a while, he noticed Naruto change his attire to an orange and blue jumpsuit and could only watch in horror as he wore it proudly. He had no clue why, but it did make sense as Kyuubi was reddish-orange, but still, the thing said kill me. I'm over here. A little bit later after getting over Naruto's choice of clothes, he noticed the treatment that the other students gave Naruto and could only feel slightly angry at them, but was glad that at least the Inyazaku, Nara and Akamichi heirs treat him like friends, and even Sasuke did to some extent. Though nothing good came out verbally, just mainly insults thrown at each other. What was confusing was that the two seemed to enjoy it when they argued, though it was always interrupted by Ino and Sakura, who would reprimand him for calling Sasuke a team, and Sakura even punched him with abnormal strength, making Itachi wonder if she was related to Tsunade somehow. Itachi saw Naruto fail two early exams set up by Mizuki just to get rid of Naruto or to discourage him from becoming a shinobi. He scowled at that and reminded himself to give the Chunin a piece of his mind and fist, completely forgetting that he was watching future events. Afterwards, Naruto would always be depressed that he failed and always ended up on top of the Yandame's head, though how he did it was mind-boggling, as he somehow managed to use the tree-walking exercise without knowing he was doing it. After this, the next memory had Itachi laughing his ass off as he watched Naruto painted the Hokage monument and outrun a horde of Anbu trying to catch him. What had him laughing even harder was that Iruka, a Chunin, was the one that caught him. He knew that Iruka was a good prankster back in his days, but it was hilarious to watch him catch him when Anbu, Konoha's best, could not. Not too much longer, he watched Naruto fail the official Genin test and could help but be saddened by it, as all he had to do was create two Bunshin. Well, he did, but they were knocked out and kind of sickly. That got him thinking on how to help him with it when he watched him swinging sadly on the swing before Mizuki came up and offered him a special test. Itachi narrowed his eyes at this and watched as he convinced Naruto to steal the forbidden scroll. He tried his best not to laugh at the way he did it as he easily bypassed all the security in the tower and knocked the Hokage out with his ultimate jutsu, Warrick no Jutsu. After he successfully made his way out with it, he head to the forest making Itachi wonder why they didn't graduate him. I mean, wouldn't you wonder how a 12-year-old boy, not even a shinobi, managed to infiltrate one of the most guarded buildings in Konoha and easily steal one of the most important scrolls in the entire village, only being surpassed by the Horatian scroll guarded by the Yondaime seals in his home, and managed to get out unseen after knocking out the Hokage. Getting over that, he watched Naruto practice heavily just to learn the first jutsu on the list, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Itachi was impressed, but wouldn't admit it as he watched Naruto work at it till he managed to make two perfect clones of himself that last for a few minutes. A few minutes later, Iruka came into the picture and asked him what was going on, only for him to push Naruto out of the way of a Fuma shuriken. Itachi narrowed his eyes as he saw Mizuki smirking at the two. After a brief pause, Mizuki revealed to Naruto that he was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, much to the displeasure of Iruka. He threw another Fuma shuriken at him, and Iruka jumped in the way taking the blow. After a few heartwarming words from the Chunin teacher, he watched Naruto run off deeper into the forest and was forced to follow him. A few minutes later, he was heard sounds of fighting nearby and checked it out, only to hear Iruka say he has deep respect for Naruto. He noticed Naruto crying heavily before Mizuki charged Iruka. Within seconds, Naruto was in front of Iruka and kicked Mizuki in the chin, sending the Fuma shuriken through the trees harmlessly. His jaw dropped as he watched Naruto create 100 Kage Bunshins before they pummeled the poor unsuspecting Chunin. Once Iruka recovered from his light blood loss, he told Naruto to close his eyes before talking his hit I-8 off and tying it on Naruto's head. Itachi couldn't help but smile as he watched Naruto glump Iruka. The next memory was his team assignments. He watched Naruto get criticized for being there as he didn't pass, only for him to proudly point at his headband. He watched him sit down beside Sasuke before he was screamed at by Ino and Sakura to get out of the chair and was violently pushed off. Itachi fell on his ass laughing as both Naruto and Sasuke's lips met, much to their horror. The older Naruto couldn't help but glare at the laughing Uchiha and was about to pull out a Horatian kunai and give him a Rasengan Senengarashi when Itachi recompassed himself. Itachi watched him be put on a team with Sasuke and Sakura. He was somewhat glad he was put on his Itato's team, but for some reason he had a feeling that Sakura was going to be a problem later on. After waiting for 3 hours, Itachi's eyes widened in horror as he realized who their Jounin sensei was going to be just before Kakashi walked into the room, getting hit by a racer. They introduced themselves, and Itachi couldn't help but notice that Naruto forced his, and that Sasuke's was completely revolved around killing him. He couldn't help but feel sorry for his little brother, but he also believed that he needed to get his priorities in line. He knew unless Sasuke got an ungodly amount of power within a short time span, it would at least take 8 maybe 10 years before he could catch him and skill level from what he saw so far. He quickly went through the real Genin test, though he couldn't help but laugh as he saw Naruto get hit with Senengarashi, which made elder Naruto grumble something about a Rasengan Senengarashi and an Uchiha. Needless to say he shut up, not wanting to try anything as he was still in Naruto's mind and he was technically God here. They skipped through the boring D-rank missions as they both muttered something about gutting a certain cat like a fish. Itachi watched curiously as they went on their first C-rank mission, guarding a drunken bridge builder known as Tazuna to the wave. They ran into the demon brothers and watched Hizotato step up as Naruto froze. He couldn't help but scowl at that, but he knew it was a somewhat reasonable response, as genin weren't supposed to have to face shinobi in the missions they take. After watching Naruto making his vow and stabbing his hand to drain the poison, they went on after bandaging his hand of course. The next thing that happened surprised him. He was not expecting Momochi's Zabuza to appear. He was expecting a B-rank Jounin, not an A, nearing S-rank Nukenin, as his scratched hit I-8 indicated, that could give a rusted Kakashi a run for his money. Needless to say, that's exactly what happened. Once he trapped Kakashi in the water, he sent Mizu Bunshins after them to kill the bridge builder. Surprisingly, both Naruto and Sasuke used near-flawless teamwork and managed to get Kakashi free, and he managed to put Zabuza under hypnosis, putting the end to the fight as he watched Zabuza get pinned to the tree. 3 Senbon pierced his neck looking like they killed him, but with his knowledge of anatomy, he instantly recognized that they just put him in a false death. The hunter nin appeared and took Zabuza off as Kakashi passed out from chakra exhaustion, as his eye took more chakra than what Ichigo has had to use. Over the next week, he watched Team 7 in the bridge builder's house, and as they learned tree climbing. Itachi had to sweat drop as he saw Naruto not even make it up 2 steps before falling on his ass. I mean he did unconsciously when he was younger, but apparently when he was trying he had no clue how to do it. He sighed as he watched him train and eat and then train even more before coming to eat dinner. It went like this for a few days till the boy Noah's Inari came out saying they had no hope. Needless to say he made something in Naruto snap as he snapped back at him before leaving a bowl of ramen half-eaten. After watching him train himself to sleep, Itachi saw him be awakened by a girl in a pink kimono. After their exchange, Itachi smiled at her as she knew the truth about real strength. Then the shocker came, he found out that the girl was a boy. His jaw unhinged itself before landing on the ground as his eyes bulged out in shock, looking somewhat like Naruto at the moment. Older Naruto refrained from laughing as he never thought he would see the day that Uchiha Itachi showed this much emotion, not only that, but almost mirror something he would do in the same situation. A few memories later, he found himself at the bridge after watching Naruto save Inari and Tsunami. He watched Naruto make a grand entrance, instead of using it as a diversion and face-faulted as he began to believe the mask had taken complete control of his brain. Itachi nearly face-faulted again as he watched him sneak into the ice mirror prison instead of helping his brother from the outside. Needless to say it was like watching a slaughter as the hunter nin riddled them with senbon. After a little bit, he noticed his brother activate his Sharingan, and things started to look up as he could tell the hunter nin was running low on chakra. In a desperate move, the hunter nin aimed for Naruto and Sasuke took the blow himself. He watched as Sasuke passed out and grew angry, but he watched as Naruto did as well, but much more extreme. He watched as Kyuubi's Yaki swirled around him, and he could sense that everyone on the bridge stopped as this was going on. He saw Naruto glared at the hunter with feral, crimson eyes before within seconds, handing his ass to him, and broke his mask with a solid punch to the face. Itachi saw Naruto charge the nin as he stood up to reveal the girl boy from the earlier memory. Naruto stopped as he recognized him, and after a short exchange between them as he asked Naruto to kill him for making him useless. He watched as Naruto rushed him, only for him to stop the killing stroke and to watch him to use an ice mirror to go somewhere. He recognized the sound of lighting crackling and with the high amount of chakra being used, knew it was Kakashi using Rikiri. After seeing he missed Zabuza and hit Haku, they had a little skirmish as Sakura wept for the dead Sasuke. He knew Hizotato wasn't dead as he could still sense chakra following through him, indicating that he was alive. Itachi watched as Geto arrived and Zabuza shed a tear as Naruto yelled at him for not caring about Haku. Watching Naruto give Zabuza a kunai, he really could say that Zabuza lived up to his name as the Demon of the Mist as he tore through the mercenary army and killed Geto in a way that would make Kyuubi proud. The mercenaries would have raided the village if the villagers hadn't arrived armed to the teeth with pitchforks and other various tools, and Naruto and Kakashi, creating a small army of cage bunchins, though most of them were Kakashis. The next few memories were light blue as they were sadness over the deaths of Zabuza and Haku and the fact that Kakashi had basically told them that a ninja's life was to be a tool for their village. Itachi couldn't help but smirk at Naruto's statement and making his own Nindo to follow his own path. Memories afterwards were boring as hell as it was back to D-rank missions as they recovered from their C-A rank mission. Though during this time he noticed that Naruto's home life was still bad as the walls outside his apartment were littered with graffiti, though the inside was somewhat cozy, even if a little messy. Not too long after them was the memory of Kakashi saying he nominated them for the Chunin exams and Naruto running into Sabaku no Gaara. After a quick evaluation, Itachi could see he was the newest Jinchuriki of the Ichibi no Tanuki. The first exam of the Chunin exams was boring, as he knew Ibiki did this every year it was held in Konoha. After watching the genin drop like flies with a somewhat amused smirk on his face, Naruto yelled at Ibiki on how he never gives up and would become a Chunin. His jaw dropped as he noticed almost everyone get their courage back within seconds, and Ibiki was forced to pass them all. Though some probably were wishing they didn't when Anko busted through the window. It wasn't that she wasn't good looking, it's just she probably could intimidate him into pretty much anything. After she toyed with their minds a bit at the edge of the forest of death, she gave them slips so that Konoha couldn't be blamed for their deaths in this exam. Needless to say he was laughing when a few teams dropped out hearing that. Itachi just watched Team 7 go through the forest with no trouble after Naruto pissed on an unsuspecting aim-nin. As the way it looked, it seemed they would breeze through till he noticed a large chakra signature in front of them. Itachi narrowed his eyes at this as it was even larger than his and watched Naruto get blasted away by what seemed to be a Futon. Tatapa. When Naruto landed, he watched as he got swallowed by a large snake and ended up in the stomach with him. While he watched Naruto trying to figure a way out of the snake, he had to wonder where it came from. No snakes were this large without them being summons, and they never used snake summons during this test, so why now? Suddenly the insides of the snake was filled up with cage buncheons, making the snake poof up in smoke as its stomach exploded. He followed Naruto to find Sakura and Sasuke, only to find them petrified in fear of a woman that felt somewhat snakish. Itachi saw Sasuke throw their scroll at him, only for Naruto to intercept and call him a scaredy cat. Soon after the woman summoned a large snake making him narrow his eyes. Only two people could summon snakes, and he knew this wasn't Anko. He watched Naruto amazingly stop the snake with pure strength with his Yaki-enhanced muscles. Itachi watched the woman, who he was suspecting to be a man, wrap their tongue around him and place Gajo Fuin over Kyuubi's seal. Everything after that went blank, much to the disappointment of Itachi, who was trying to figure out why Orochimaru was there. The next memories flew by quickly till they found themselves at the preliminaries. Though his eyes widened as he saw the curse seal activate on his Itaudo and wanted to rip the snake limb from limb for that. After that, all the fights were boring him until Naruto's fight. It was one-sided at first as Kiba was trouncing him, but Naruto kept getting back up and wearing the Inyazaku air down little by little with his tricks. Itachi was slightly impressed that Naruto was actually that smart in battle and was trying to figure out why he couldn't translate it to real life. In the end though, Itachi was laughing his ass off as Naruto farted in Kiba's face before using Cage Bunshin to use a kick combo that kind of looked like he copied it from Sasuke, which was even more laughable as he copied a copycat. The fight between the Hyuga heir and her older cousin was slightly interesting, though one-sided, and the way he attacked her at the end of the fight rose a strong reaction from Naruto. The next fight to catch his attention was Gaara vs Rock Lee. Itachi's had his jaw hit the floor as he kept alternating between Guy and Lee as he watched the fight, thinking how in the hell Guy made Lee into a force to be reckoned with. In the end it didn't matter as Gaara crushed his right leg and arm. After watching the quickest fight of the preliminaries, he tuned out the Hokage as he already knew what he was going to say and watched the unfolding of the fights for the finals. After seeing them, he was slightly worried for Sasuke, but was really worried for Naruto. Sure, Sasuke was going up against a Jinchuriki, but Naruto was going up against a branch house prodigy. The differences in skill were off the chart, and if he was betting, he would put all his money on Neji, while giving Sasuke a good shot at beating Gaara. Itachi was slightly pissed when Kakashi gave Naruto to Ibisu without even giving him a tips on how to beat a Hyuga. He wasn't sure how good Ibisu was now, but he doubted that he knew how to defeat the prodigy and kind of doubted that he could beat him himself. Though after an elongated chase in which Ibisu won, Naruto allowed him to teach him. Ibisu took him to the hot springs and the onsen to teach him water walking. That didn't last long when Naruto noticed Jiraiya peeping at the ladies' onsen. Itachi couldn't help but sigh as things just never seemed to change as a large toad knocked Ibisu out and Jiraiya introduced himself to Naruto. After a long and very confusing sidetrack, Naruto managed to convince Jiraiya to train him. The way he did it though had Itachi twitching up a storm and cussing out whatever deity allowed him to invent such a jutsu. During their training Jiraiya had released the Gajo Fuin on top of his seal and taught Naruto water walking before how to summon. Itachi just twitched as every day Naruto could only summon a tadpole and both he and Jiraiya were getting irritated. So after getting clobbered by Sakura by accidentally tripping on her, Jiraiya had thrown him off the cliff much to the shock of Itachi. As they fell he noticed he was back inside Naruto's mind and then in front of Kyuubi's cage. Itachi couldn't help but smirk as Naruto had the gall to threaten Kyuubi to giving him some of its yaki. The scene shifted back outside as he did the seals for Kuchius. In an instant, both he and Naruto were standing on top of the biggest damn toad he had ever seen. Itachi paled when he realized he was standing on Gamabunta's head and was praying that this went well. In the end, Naruto passed out from trying to convince Bunta to allow him to summon him. After that memories just began to pass by like a blur. He watched a fight between Naruto and Neji and was surprised that Naruto had somehow pulled out a win, even if he did Kyuubi's Yaki to do it. After watching the next fights between the Sunagura and the lazy Nara and his Itaudo handily beat Gaara using Kakashi's personal jutsu, he saw that mostly everyone pass out to a powerful yet somewhat simple genjutsu, including Naruto. So the memory ended there, leaving a slightly irked Uchiha prodigy. Going through the next door, he saw Kakashi order Naruto and Sakura to wake anyone they could up and follow Sasuke chased after Gaara. Everything passed by quickly, and they arrived to see Sasuke with the curse seal activated gritting his teeth as a partial transformed Gaara lunged at him, only for Sakura to jump in the way and be pinned to a tree. Going into protective mode, Naruto took Sasuke's place and fought Gaara to his full strength and even called out Gamabunta to help him. In the end, it came down to a well-placed head, but in a showdown between two Jinchuriki which ended in Naruto's victory. Itachi smiled as Naruto pierced through Gaara's mental barrier with his speech before Sasuke jumped down to help him get back. The memory ended as Naruto passed out. The memories afterwards passed by as a blur till Naruto was dragged along with the perverted Sannin to find the worst gambler in the world, Tsunade. At the first town, which was the town they passed through earlier today, Jiraiya got sidetracked by a woman blinking at him and left Naruto in the room alone. It wasn't that way for long as a knock was heard on the door. When Naruto answered it, Itachi was shocked to see himself standing at the door with a shinobi he knew to be Hoshigaki Kisame. Seeing himself trying to get Naruto to come with him without any trouble, Sasuke arrived and to his horror, he watched himself easily counter and then torture his Itaudo, as if he didn't care about him. Just as the uncaring Itachi finished torturing Sasuke, Jiraiya arrived on the scene and forced both Kisame and himself to run. He was too stunned to recall the next memories, but then he watched Naruto working tirelessly on one of the Yondame's signature jutsus, the Rasengan. Itachi paled remembering the threat of the Rasengan Senengarashi and slowly moved away from the elder Naruto. He watched him master the first two steps in meeting Tsunade. After a quick and one-sided fight with her, he watched Naruto make a bet with her before passing out once more. Over the next week, Itachi watched Naruto try and master the final step of the Rasengan, while noticing Jiraiya, Shizune and even Tsunade coming in to check up on him, seeing if he made any progress. On the last day of training, somehow, someway Naruto managed to complete the Rasengan before passing out from exhaustion as he pushed himself to the limit. The next memory was the fight between him and Kabuto, as a poisoned Jiraiya tried to take on an armless Orochimaru, which if the situation wasn't dire, he would have thought to be humorous. In a titanic struggle, Naruto managed to save Tsunade by taking a strike to the heart before delivering a fully developed Rasengan to Kabuto's stomach before passing out, much to the dismay of the Uchiha prodigy, wanting to see the three Sannin fight. Unfortunately for him, he didn't get the opportunity as he was forced to watch the trip to Konoha, though slightly amusing to see Jiraiya get bashed around, wasn't as exciting as watching the three have a showdown like they said happened. The memories blurred by as they didn't seem to be of any importance till he found themselves on a hospital roof, looking at both Naruto and Sasuke as they stared each other down. The fight was completely even as Sasuke's Sharingan tried to dominate Naruto's cage bunshin. After unleashing a devastating Gakakyu, the fire died down to show Naruto forming a Rasengan. In response he saw Sasuke use Chidori and watched the two lunge each other as Sakura raced to stop them. If Kakashi hadn't picked that time to intervene, they would be mourning the lose of Sakura as the two attacks would have hit her. He watched Kakashi reprimand Naruto and didn't even bat an eyelash at Sasuke, making his blood boil as Naruto wasn't the only one using a dangerous jutsu. Apparently he wasn't the only who thought so as Jiraiya was there, but didn't say anything other than listen to Kakashi reprimand him for teaching him a jutsu Naruto wasn't ready for. That statement had irked Itachi to no end as he could say the same for his Itaudo, as he taught him Chidori. After the memory ended, Itachi walked up to the next before his eyes widened, seeing a door mix evenly with black, dark blue, light blue and red. Itachi cringed as Naruto looked at him before opening the door. He saw the lazy Nara heir wearing a Chunin vest tell him that Sasuke had left the village on his own free will. At this Itachi paled as he watched Naruto and Shikamaru get Choji, Kiba and Neji and dismissed Sakura as she would only slow them down. When they did this, she grabbed onto Naruto and begged for him to return Sasuke. It was at that moment Itachi saw Naruto's blue eyes become lifeless for a brief second before nodding and giving her the good guy pose and promising her he would. He looked over at the older Naruto and noticed his eyes were closed as if he didn't want to relive that memory. He wondered why as he watched a group run into the sound four and separate as each of the genin squared up against one of them. It was down to the red-haired girl carrying what he felt to be Sasuke's crate against Naruto and Shikamaru when a teen with white hair took the barrel from her and took off. After the Nara convinced Naruto to chase after him, Itachi found himself in a clearing with Naruto glaring at the white-haired boy with Yaki flowing into his system. Itachi's eyes widened as he saw him pull bones out of his skin and realized this was one of the Kagaya clan. He watched Naruto's clones get massacred by the Kagaya as the barrel exploded with malicious chakra and Sasuke stepped out of it, not looking like himself anymore. With a quick look he rushed off leaving Naruto against the Kagaya. Itachi gritted his teeth as he watched this and saw Lee take Naruto's place, allowing him to go after Sasuke. Once he reached Sasuke, they exchange a few words, mostly Naruto trying to convince Sasuke to return home. The two began to fight as they did the memory of the rooftop. The two battle and used the Rasengan and Chidori against each other once more. The two attacks cancelled each other out as both looked somewhat tired after that. That when Sasuke took an early advantage by using the curse seal and wiped the floor with Naruto before calling it back as there was no more need to use it. In a moment that horrified him, he watched his younger brother stab Naruto in his right shoulder with Chidori, just missing the heart as Naruto managed to move out of the way. That's when shit hit the fan and Naruto counter-attacked in his Kyuubified state. He honestly couldn't feel sorry for his brother as Naruto was manhandling him. Then he noticed Sasuke's Sharingan advance and the tides turned once again. With the matured Sharingan, he watched Sasuke manage to regain control of the battle till the end where Naruto threw him into the cliff using a cage bunshin whip. That's when his brother countered with Ryuka and burned all the clones to a crisp. Both he and Sasuke widened their eyes as they saw the one closest to him was actually the real Naruto that looked up at Sasuke with a lifeless look in his eyes. Sasuke grabbed Naruto and yelled at him to give up before throwing him off the cliff and aerial pillar drove Naruto's head into the ground before throwing his lifeless body in the water. Itachi was slightly surprised at this as he was sure the memory would end here as Naruto was out and barely alive when something happened scaring even him. Red Yauki leaked out of Naruto and started surrounding him before punching Sasuke with monstrous strength. As Sasuke was recovering, Itachi took a step back as he looked at Naruto, who had Red Yauki around him in the shape of a fox with one tail. Within a minute the fight had turned into a beating as Sasuke couldn't even scratch Naruto in this form before he activate the second stage of his curse seal. Itachi paled as he saw this and his brother looked like a monster with human-like hands for wings. The two combatants stared at each other before Sasuke spoke about this being a fitting place for their battle. After he finished, both charged up their most powerful attacks and glided towards each other before the Chidori and Rasengan met. In a brilliant and slightly frightened show of light, the two struggled for dominance. As they did so Sasuke sent his other hand into Naruto's chest, trying to kill him, but held back as he couldn't do it, while Naruto only scratched his hit I-8 before the two attacks gave out and he passed out. The memories after this seemed to go by quickly. Itachi only registered that Naruto was going on a trip with Jiraiya to train for 2.5 years and that both he and Sakura promised that they would bring Sasuke back together. Itachi couldn't help but dislike the girl. Something in her eyes just threw him off and he didn't like it. He watched Naruto and Jiraiya leave the village and the quick start out on their training trip. Needless to say, Itachi was slightly pissed at Jiraiya's lack of training as he watched the 3 years blur by. I mean almost all the training was Naruto himself as Jiraiya only would come by and teach him a thing or two about sealing or taught him to draw out more of Kyuubi's Yauki. In an attempt to bring more out, Jiraiya tried to unlock the seal with a key that Minato left behind but failed miserably as Naruto instead went berserk with 4 tails of Yauki. In a stunning performance, Itachi got to witness the rare event of the Gamma Sannin, using his legendary Sage mode to defend himself from the crazed Naruto and still was getting his ass handed to him. In the end, Naruto passed out as Kyuubi's Yauki had taken its toll on him and left him in a bloodied mess. The last thing he saw was Jiraiya summon Bunta to get them to a hospital before the memory faded. After that, the training went back to what it usually did, Naruto training himself, while Jiraiya would pop in to give a hint or two. It lasted this way throughout the rest of his training memories till they returned to Konoha. After that, Naruto started skipping doors, much to Itachi's confusion. Seeing it, Naruto answered him. As much as I want to show you the rest of them, I grow tired, so I will just show you the reason for the way I look as I do know. Itachi nodded as he was getting tired himself after watching Naruto's roller coaster that he called life. As they reached the last few doors, he noticed something about them that he didn't like. They were pitch black with some yellow in them. Naruto closed his eyes before opening the door and pushing the Uchiha prodigy inside. Once inside, Itachi found himself surrounded by ruins of a village. He instantly turned around as he felt a massive output of Yauki and killer intent and saw Naruto with 8 tails waving around him and a girl a little younger than he was with green Yauki surrounding her in the shape of a dog with 5 tails. His eyes widened seeing this and looked around and realized where he was. This is Konoha. It is. Now watch. Came from the Naruto besides him as 100 battered Konoha shinobi arrived to see the devastation. In front was Tsunade and Sakura, wearing the symbol that signified her as the Hokage. Itachi narrowed his eyes at this as Tsunade spoke. What happened you? She said pointed at Naruto with hatred rolling off her in waves. The Uchiha tried not to back down, but even he was afraid of the killing intent that the slug Sannin was pouring out at the Kyuubified Naruto. The girl besides him growled at her. Is that all you can say? Itachi wasn't sure what was going on, but from what he saw, Tsunade treated Naruto as a brother and possibly a son from what he had seen. Tsunade narrowed her eyes at the Jinchuriki as Sakura stepped up. What else can she say? He is a monster after all. Itachi narrowed his eyes at the pink-haired girl and wished to him that torture Sasuke would pop out and do the same to her. As he was thinking this, Tsunade spoke venomously as she glared at Naruto. Did you actually think I care for you? I nearly vomited every time I saw you. You reminded me of deceased Tauto and my past lover. I couldn't stand being around you. I only came with you as Shizune forced me to. I was glad when Jiraiya died as I didn't have to fake liking you anymore, as I didn't have worry about him. I was glad when Sakura executed Shizune and all your friends for helping you as it finally got her off my back. And you know what? That necklace you wore is a fake. Did you think I would give you the real one? Ha. With each word she spoke, Itachi trembled as his Sharingan span wildly and his opinion of the slug Sannin was thrown out the window. If you looked directly at his eyes, you could see that the Tama were slowly swirling into each other beginning to form the Manjikyu. As he shook with rage, he saw Naruto doing the same as he slowly stood and could vacantly see a ninth tail being made as Naruto spoke. So? It was all a lie then. The red Yaki began swirling around him madly as he glared at the women in front of him before letting out an earth-shattering roar. Suddenly Naruto and the girl disappeared from sight and started slaughtering the remaining shinobi until only around 20 remained. The major ones being Tsunade, Sakura, an unknown blonde-haired girl from Kumagakure as her hit I-8 signified. Itachi could barely hold in the vomit willing its way up as he looked at the dismembered and disemboweled bodies that was left of Naruto and the girl's attack. As he was refraining from doing so, a large number of shinobi from Iwa, Suna and Konoha, though their headbands all had scratches through them, surrounded the three shinobi. Suddenly Naruto spoke maliciously. Imprison the rest. Leaves these two for me. He saw Kakashi and a few others from other villages nod as they used chakra chains to keep them from resisting. Once they were out of the way, Naruto glared at the two women before letting out another earth-shattering roar before disappearing. Even with his Sharingan, he couldn't keep up with Naruto's movements and watch as Tsunade barely could but was torn to shreds within seconds. The pink-hair girl was in shock as she saw this and suddenly had the clawed hand of Naruto holding her throat. This is for ruining my life, bitch. With that said, Itachi closed his eyes as he heard her head be ripped off her shoulders before being sliced in two. After a few moments, he felt the Yaki beginning to drain and opened his eyes to see Naruto walking away as the ex-Konoha shinobi started rebuilding the town with the help of the Suna and Iwa shinobi. After this he watched a girl from earlier, who he called Kaisha, talk to him for a little bit before admitting her feelings for him over the course of the war. Itachi was slightly stunned at this and even more so at Naruto's response, saying he felt the same for a while. He suddenly found himself in an awkward position as the two started to kiss and it turned into a make-out session. He was about to turn to Naruto to tell him to stop it when he heard movement behind them. He turned around and noticed two people wearing the same cloaks he and Kisame were wearing earlier. He looked confused as to who they were and noticed both Naruto and Kaisha growling at them. As the four fought, the Naruto besides Itachi spoke. They are from Akatsuki. Their goal is to collect the Bijuu so they can rule the world. They say they are doing it for world peace, but what they say and what they do don't match. These two are the subordinates to the true leader, Uchiha Madara, who I killed in a memory I do not want to show to anyone. The auburn-haired man is known as Pain, the man who killed Jiraiya. This had Itachi's eyes widen to an extreme extent before Naruto continued. The other is Konan. She's been with him since they were children, and I'm pretty sure they are lovers. He nodded as he watched the fight and was stunned that he had a Manjikyu Sharingan in his right eye. Even with it though, he could tell Naruto was almost finished with Pain, but the girl was struggling as Konan kept her off balance till the rain started. In a desperate move, Pain lunged out and stabbed Kaisha in the heart. Naruto rage consumed him as the ninth and final tail grew and ripped the auburn-haired man to pieces before he could counter. The same went for his partner as she became a sickening goo. Itachi watched as Naruto walked besides a dying Kaisha as shinobi from nearby began to arrive. Suddenly, Hikaru the fox began to tell Naruto of a way to save her and change everything that had happened. Itachi's eyes widened as he continued on how to do the ritual to travel back in time. He watched as Naruto did everything Kyuubi had told him. Suddenly both were covered in their respective tenets Yaki until it started to morph into a blackish color and then into a ball before becoming a dark flash of light. Suddenly, he found himself outside in the hall with Naruto. After recompassing himself, Itachi spoke. Was that the future? Naruto shook his head. No. That was just a possible future through my eyes. I didn't show you other things as it was best for you not to know everything and the fact that I am growing tired. Itachi nodded as his second question was answered as well. Then a disturbing thought popped up. Did I really kill my clan? Naruto only nodded his head in response at him. Itachi looked down in shame at this. Naruto noticed this and spoke. Do not think of yourself like the one from my time. You have seen what you can become, so you must work not to become it. Itachi looked up at Naruto and spoke. But how? That was just one way you can turn out. If you don't want to turn out like that, you can change it. It's that simple. It's just up to you to do it. Itachi nodded numbly at that before looking at Naruto softly. How did you manage to get through all that and manage to stay sane? Naruto raised an eyebrow at him. You think I'm sane? Itachi just stepped back as Naruto felt like strangling him. You think you'd be sane from going through all that? You only got a glimpse of it and didn't have to feel the pain. Itachi winced at that and knew it was true. You're right, I wouldn't be. Naruto sighed at him. Sorry, I kind of carried away there. But it is the truth. Itachi nodded at him before looking at him. I think I need some sleep, this is a lot to digest. Naruto nodded at him as Itachi faded from his mind. Once he was back outside in the real world, everything became a blur for him till he went into his tent. He sat down and thought about everything he had seen in his mind before laying down to get some sleep. I will change. I will not be like what I saw. Hazakiri Kaisha Jinchuriki of Gobi no Haku. Age 16 at the beginning, 7 after time travel. Height 5'3", 4'1". Breast size B cup, a child for Pete's sakes. Skin creamy white. A little lighter than Haku's. Homowagakure, hair color snow white. Length mid-back, shoulder length. Style straight, wavy hair, kind of pointed at the end. Build athletic, more wiry with compacted muscles. Hiding style good with weapons, average with ninjutsu, jinjutsu and taijutsu, loves poison. Parents Tsuchikage, Kazakiri Arashi and unknown women, probably died at birth or around when she was very young. I do not own Naruto. Morning had come by quickly and a certain Uchiha was not happy about it. After the roller coaster of a night, he was willing his eyes shut while mumbling at the sun to go away as he was still very tired. He was still trying to determine if what he saw was the truth or it was just an illusion by Kyuubi. He wouldn't put it past the kitsune to do that, but from what he noticed about Naruto outside and inside in his mind, pointed to that what he saw was real. Yet, some part of him was just finding it hard to believe that someone could travel time. As he was debating on the physics and logic of time travel, Naruto had woken up cursing the sun's existence. He slowly got up and dressed himself, figuring Itachi to already be awake, only to see that he wasn't. He blinked in confusion at this before shrugging as he tried to light the fire, only to realize that his body didn't know how to do so. He cursed at this and mentally reminded himself to start training soon as possible, after he and Kaisha had reunited. Sighing as he didn't have any matches or some flint, he walked to Itachi's tent to wake him up. Unzipping the tent, Naruto barely managed to dodge the kunai thrown at him. He glared at Itachi as he glared right back, pissed at the fact that now he was forced to get up. Neither backed down from their glaring contest, not wanting to give in and give the other victory. As the two glared at each other, Itachi took the time to search through Naruto's eyes. The reason being that the eyes were the gateway to one's soul. Looking into his electric blues, he noticed the same sorrow, pain and joy that was always in his eyes, with hints of uncanny wisdom that wasn't there before. But what surprised him was a look that he knew because of Anko. The look of betrayal. He shivered at that and looked away from Naruto, knowing what he saw last night was true. Naruto looked at him with some confusion before realizing what caused his reaction. He closed his eyes and nodded lightly before walking back outside to let Itachi get himself dressed decently. He sighed as sat down next to the burned-out fire. He sighed once more as he looked at the horizon, remembering the day before he lost everything. Flashback. Naruto was wandering through the camp as he felt something was off, he just didn't know what. He sighed as he continued walking through the camp, ignoring the looks he was getting. None of them were looks of hate, which he was glad for, just respect, some loyalty and a little bit of fear. What was odd was that most of them were coming from Iwa Shinobi. Fear wasn't anything new as he was the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Kitsune, but they feared him more of being the son of the Yondaime Hokage and the fact that he could use Hiraishin. Though the respect and loyalty puzzled him, he figured that he somehow managed to gain it during the course of the war. Shaking that off, he continued by them till he was at the edge of the camp, looking at the sunset. He sighed deeply, wanting to know what went wrong between him and Tsunade. He didn't understand it at all. From everything she had shown him throughout the time they knew each other, she had shown him nothing but kindness and love. But now, for a reason he didn't understand, she hated him with a passion beyond all possible reasons. It was also confusing as to why Sakura hated him. Sure, in the beginning she was spiteful, only because that was how she was raised and that he was kind of annoying, but they came to understand each other after Sasuke left. As he continued thinking about what went wrong, both Gaara and Sasuke walked up to him. Once there, Sasuke was the first to speak up. Figured you'd be out here. So what's up, dope? Naruto turned back at him and scoffed at him. Nothing, team. Sasuke rose his eyebrow at this, knowing that it was a lie, while Gaara looked on him passively, though a little worry could be seen. Naruto. Spoke Gaara as both Sasuke and himself gave Naruto death glares. Naruto sighed as he turned away from his two brothers. It's nothing really. Both increased their glares at him before Sasuke spoke up. I know you better than that. Something is eating at you, now what is it, or do I have to beat it out of you? Naruto sighed before turning towards them. You two don't give up, do you? No. Gaara quickly responded as Sasuke snorted in response. He sighed before looking up at both of them and noticed Kaisha walking towards them and silently cursed. For some reason, she could manage to get him to open up and he really didn't want to right now. Once she arrived, she noticed the somewhat tense atmosphere but knew it had to deal with Naruto. Breeding again. Both Gaara and Sasuke nodded as Naruto glared at all three of them. She sighed before sitting down beside him. Alright, now tell us what's wrong. Otherwise we're never going to stop pestering you about it. Both Gaara and Sasuke nodded at this, making Naruto scowl at them before sighing as he looked up at the horizon. I was just thinking about why all this had to happen. Why the old hag turned her back on me after everything we had been through. Why Sakura suddenly changed after brining team over here back home. Aisha's eyes softened at this, while both Gaara and Sasuke looked the same as always, but understood him perfectly. Sasuke nodded as he placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder. None of us are sure, especially seeing how she cared for you before Jiraiya died. As for Sakura, there is still too much that is unknown. Naruto sighed at this, but knew it was true before nodding at Sasuke. Kaisha smiled softly at him and was about to get up when Gaara spoke. Well, it's time to get ready. Be in the command tent in 10 minutes. Naruto nodded as both Gaara and Sasuke left with slight smirks on their faces, leaving Kaisha and him alone. Aisha's eyes widened as they left her behind before mentally cussing them out. She turned to Naruto and blushed lightly before shaking her head. Naruto. I was wondered. He looked over at her with curiosity on his face, making her lose her courage. She sighed a bit before asking a different question. Why do you look at the sunset? Naruto looked at her for a bit before looking back at the setting sun. She sighed as she figured he wasn't going to answer when he spoke up. I've always have. It's something I can't explain, but every time I watch it set, it feels like all my problems go away with it. She was slightly shocked by this response, but nodded as turned and looked at the setting sun. I guess I understand. It is kind of soothing to watch. Naruto nodded his head slightly as he continued watching, but continued to steal glances at her. After a few moments, he pushed himself up and offered a hand to her. Well, time to go. Don't want to piss Gaara and Tenchi off again by being late. She smiled a bit and nodded as she accepted his hand. As they walked to the tent, he couldn't help but notice all the shinobi looking at him in a knowing way. He blinked in confusion at this, as though he may be smarter and stronger, he still was slightly dense. Shaking their looks off, he looked at Kaisha and noticed the light gleaming off her. He quickly turned away, not wanting to be caught staring before he sighed as they reached the command tent. It's not meant to be anyways. It's not like she doesn't have plenty of suitors anyways. Don't need to add to the number. Shaking that thought off, both Naruto and Kaisha entered the command tent with a slightly irritated Tenchi as he looked at a stoic Gaara and Sasuke. Sighing at both of them, he held out his watch and started counting down on his watch. 5 4 3 2 1. In a poof of smoke, Kakashi appeared as he pocketed something in his pouch, most likely the last version of Icha Icha Paradise that Jiraiya had wrote and left with Naruto to publish. Both Koharu and Homura glared daggers at him, but the Cycloptic man seemed immune to it. Shaking his head at the tardy man, Tenchi spoke up. Now that we are all here, we can go over our strategy for the dawn assault. Everyone in the room nodded as Gaara stepped forward. As we did in the mist, we are going to send Naruto and Kaisha to Konoha, but without me this time. Our intelligence says that they are planning for a sneak attack on us soon, so I must stay behind to give our forces a chance. Kakashi nodded as he continued off for Gaara, as it was odd for him to talk so much. Their forces there will be minimal and should bring the remaining forces to its knees as we have them cut off from Kumagakure. Both Kaisha and Naruto nodded in understanding. Tenchi nodded at them as he turned to Kakashi. Kakashi, you will be leading our secondary defense line as Gaara, Sasuke and I will be leading the first. If we should fall, you are the new field general. The copycat nodded his head as he knew the ranking well. It was the two Kages and Naruto, Sasuke and then himself. Tenchi nodded as he turned back to his advisors and nodded. Go get the forces and tell them to be prepared for a strike in the middle of the night. Go. His advisors quickly left to rally the troops as he quickly turned back towards Naruto and Kaisha and noticed them holding hands. You two will leave in 10 minutes. Kaisha, I would like to have a word with you before you leave. Aisha nodded lightly at him as Naruto spoke. Meet me at the eastern camp entrance. She nodded and watched Naruto vanish in a swirl of leaves. She turned back around and walked over to where Tenchi was in the back of the tent. When she arrived she looked at his stoic form and spoke as he seemed not to notice her. You wanted to see me, Nai-san? Then she snapped out of his thoughts as he looked over at the slightly curious Kaisha and nodded. Yes I did. Kaisha, you know you're like a sister to me, right? She nodded slowly, not really understanding what he was getting at. Tenchi sighed as he continued. I would just like you to know that I love your squirt and that I give you my blessings if you wish to continue see him after today. I know your father would. Aisha's eyes widened as she started choking in surprise. Of all the things she expected, this wasn't it. Was it that obvious to everyone that she had fallen for him? The Gondamed Tsuchikage could only smirk at her reaction as he patted her on the back. Once she managed to get her breath back, she looked up at him and was about to speak when he cut her off. You best get out of here, Amato. You have a mission. She was about to say that he was changing the subject, but the look on his face left no room for argument. She nodded lightly at him before turning around and walking out of the tent before heading towards the eastern entrance. As she reached there, she noticed Naruto filing his nails with a kunai. Noticing her, he put up the kunai and nodded before both took off heading towards Konoha. But for some reason, Kaisha felt a large weight was lifted off of her as she followed Naruto. Flashback end. As he was lost on memory lane, Itachi had walked out of his tent and put it up before lighting the fire to cook some breakfast. He noticed a far-off look on Naruto's face, but shoved it aside believing he was thinking about the past. Sighing, he looked off in the distance as the water in the kettle boiled so Naruto could eat his ramen. So, Naruto. Why is it exactly why you wanted to come out here? I have a good idea, but I'm not totally sure. Snapping out of memory lane, Naruto turned to Itachi before sighing. I'm looking for Kaisha as she'll be somewhere around the border. The Uchiha prodigy nodded at this as he pulled out a stick of Pocky and started munching on it. Naruto saw this and couldn't help but twitch uncontrollably. What the hell? It's like he has a never-ending supply of it. I swear one day I'm going to find out where he keeps it and steal it. So how exactly are you going to find her? It's not as if she's going to be wearing a bright neon orange jumpsuit saying here I am. Itachi asked between bites of his precious Pocky. Naruto twitched even more at this and muttered darkly at the smirking Uchiha. Sighing, he answered his question. That's where Kyuubi and Gobi come in. When they can feel each other, they're going to send their Yauki into our system so we can sense each other. Then we are to escape then elude our guards and meet each other. Itachi twitched at this. So you were planning on ditching me? Naruto nodded as the kettle whistled and started pouring it into his cup. He twitched even more at this and used every ounce of his will to refrain himself from strangling the young blonde-haired Jinchuriki. And he was having a difficult time as he was inching closer to him. Naruto refrained from smirking as he saw this and quickly slurped his ramen before throwing the cup in the fire as he was finished. He quickly got up and quickly took down his tent and got it packed before looking at the still twitching Uchiha prodigy that was glaring at him with intent to kill. Naruto easily shrugged that off as he spoke up with a semi-amused voice. Now then, can we continue or do I have to ditch you now? A small string of curses later, they were ready to leave, though Itachi was still trying to glare a hole through Naruto's head. Naruto just smirked as he led the way in taunting fashion, making the Uchiha scowl even more. He really wanted to strangle the blonde hair abomination in front of him right now. Naruto smirked knowing this and did his best not to laugh. Pissing people off was one of his all-time favorite hobbies after all. On a dirt road heading towards the High no Kuni border, Tenshi was currently trying his best not to strangle the girl in front of him and the seven-tailed creature within him. The reason being that he barely got an ounce of sleep as every time he came close to falling asleep, Kaisha tried to sneak off. Of course he caught her, but then Shichibi decided to start annoying him once he managed to get her to sleep once more. And then once he managed to get it to shut up and nearly fall asleep again, Kaisha made a break for it once more. So at the moment he was contemplating about just knocking her out and bringing her back to Iwa as he was sure another night like last night and his sanity would probably slip. He mentally sighed as Kaisha was looking slightly happier than normal as they neared the border. He instinctively knew that he was going to have even more problems than last night, seeing the smirk crossing her face, and was ready to do what he needed to do for his sanity. Oh. What's the matter Tenshi-kun? Tired already? The said Jinchuriki cursed darkly as he heard his annoying Biju taunt him once more. He really wondered how he managed to stay sane with it inside him. No thanks to you asshole. Laughing was heard on the other side making him narrow his eyes and was getting ready to perform a weak seal just to shut it up. Ha. Sorry, but I couldn't help it. It's so fun to watch you squirm. And don't you even dare think of sealing me off. Without me you would have already passed out by now. Then she narrowed his eyes at this and started muttering darkly about having beaver stew. Needless to say Shichibi shut up. One thing the seven-tailed creature didn't like was when its vessel threatened it with that. Tenshi mentally sighed in relief as he looked at the bright glow coming off of Kaisha as she was zoned out, probably talking to Gobi again. Tiled, I can sense them. Kaisha's eyes went wide hearing this. Naruto-kun is close by. Gobi nodded at Kaisha's statement. Yes, Kyuubi's presence is close by meaning he is here. Kaisha smiled brightly at this. Alright then. Let's ditch Tenshi. Not yet child. Wait till tonight. Gobi interrupted her. Shichibi is going to distract him so you can get a head start on him and I can flare my Yauki into your system. She nodded as it seemed to be a good plan, and Shichibi was going to be helping them, making everything easier on their part. Alright, just tell me when. Gobi nodded before laying down in its cell and falling asleep as it was going to be a hectic night tonight. Then she sighed as she zoned back in as they neared a large town that was separated due to it being in both Iwa and Hai no Kuni borders. Kaisha's eyes widened as she remembered the town. It was where she and Naruto first met. Flashback, Aisha growled low in her throat as she slit another Konoha shinobi's throat, only to see 5 Kumo shinobi take his place. She quickly pulled out another kunai and deflected the shuriken thrown at her. She rushed towards the closest one and threw the kunai towards him and quickly took out 2 more. The shinobi blocked it easily, only to have her stab him in the heart. Using his body as a meat shield, she deflected the kunais thrown towards her before throwing hers and ending an unsuspecting Chunin's life. She reached in her pouch to pull out another kunai, only to find that she was out. Kaisha growled in frustration as she threw the lifeless corpse at invading shinobi and went through a quick series of hand seals. Oten. Doryoden. The large earth dragon erupted from the ground and quickly slammed into the Kumo shinobi before they had a chance to recover. She jumped to the ground as she barely avoided having dozens of shuriken embedded themselves into her. Suddenly, her father's voice was heard on the town's loudspeaker. Retreat. Head to recovering point C. Aisha growled at this, but seeing the devastation the sneak attack had, she knew they wouldn't hold up for much longer. She quickly rushed away from the invading shinobi and headed towards the said recovery point. Damn it. Where is our reinforcements? I knew those Konoha shinobi couldn't be trusted. As she thought that, she noticed her father on the edge of the village, facing off against a blonde-haired woman and a pink-haired teen, and was getting severely beaten. She growled deeply at this and called upon a tail of Gobizyaki to help him escape. She kicked Tsunade in the face and backhanded Sakura before landing beside her beaten-up father. He growled in irritation seeing her. Damn it Kaisha. Leave. This is my battle. Aisha glared at her father. Look at yourself too san. You won't last another minute in your condition. Let me handle this. Arashi growled at her as he knew that she was strong, but facing off against a Sannin along with her Hokage apprentice wasn't something she could do. Seeing the look on her father's face, she spoke trying to give him reassurance. Don't worry. I'll only hold them off for a bit before retreating myself. Just get to the recovery point. Our people need you right now. Even if he didn't want to admit it, she had a point. But he would be damned if he was going to admit that. He growled out a bit before speaking in a commanding tone. You better come back. Aisha nodded at her father as both super-strength women got up and looked at their new threat. Arashi seeing this, took off not wanting to force his daughter fight them for long. Seems we have to deal with a Jinchuriki now. Tsunade spoke glaring daggers at Kaisha. Sakura nodded as she was readjusting the plan she devised to counter Naruto when using Kyubizyaki. Both quickly rushed Kaisha with speeds that she couldn't keep up with. Her eyes widened when she felt the wind leave her and flew back through a building, only to be kicked back in by Sakura. The small structure couldn't take the stress and collapsed with her inside. Both Sakura and Tsunade waited patiently for her to come out as they knew it would take more than that to defeat a Jinchuriki. Just as they predicted, an eruption of green light and the rocks were blown away as a 3-tailed Kaisha stood in the center of the rubble. She quickly rushed Sakura and started to wildly slash at her as she didn't have too much control of her battle style since her animalistic side was in the one thinking for her. Sakura parried most of the blows, but the chakra claws were giving her trouble. She was forced to self-heal herself due to the poisonous nature of Gobizyaki. She brought a quick knee to Kaisha's stomach before delivering an uppercut to her jaw, rocketing her into the sky. At a waiting Tsunade who axe kicked her back to the ground. Aisha hit the ground creating a large crater from the force of the blow. She slowly picked herself up, only for Tsunade to land on her and pin her to the ground. She struggled with every ounce of strength she had and even was beginning to pull on the 4th tail, but Tsunade's strength outmatched hers by a landslide. Sakura rushed over there with her hand glowing before she rammed it into Kaisha's stomach. Aju Fuin. Her eyes widened as the pain hit her like a truck as Gobizyaki left her system. Tsunade smirked before throwing her against another building. Sakura looked towards the retreating Iwa shinobi before speaking. Should we follow? Tsunade shook her head. No, it might be a trap. We'll rest here tonight before giving chase. Sakura nodded before turning to a panting Kaisha as she struggled to get back to her feet. Well, we at least have a prisoner. Retreat. It's the night in Kiroi. The man's voice was cut off as a flash of yellow light went by him and a jet of blood gushed out of his neck. A kunai suddenly landed between Kaisha and the 2 cage-level shinobi. Tsunade's eyes widened as she recognized it as in a flash of light, a young man with spiky blonde hair wearing clothes reminiscent of the late Yondaime Hokage was standing there. He looked like a mirror image of the man. The only differences were the 3 whisker-like marks on his cheeks and his hit eye since it had a scratch through it. The Kanbi was the only thing that came from Tsunade. Unfortunately for her, it was. Uzumaki Naruto was standing in front of them looking at both coldly. He quickly pulled out 2 more tri-pronged kunai and threw them up in the air while going through a set of hand seals. Page kunai no jutsu. The 2 suddenly multiplied in nearly 1,000 as they started to rain down on the small town. Tsunade's eyes widened as she grabbed Sakura. Retreat. Get the hell out of here. In a swirl of leaves she was gone, not wanting to face off Naruto if he was going to be using that technique. Naruto looked back at the shocked form of Kaisha before looking up. Kakashi-sensei. Get her to the recovery point and tell them we're going to take the town back. The masked Jounin jumped down and picked up a still shocked Kaisha and headed off towards the now confused and slightly scared Iwa shinobi that were still in the area. Naruto looked up to see Sasuke smirking at him. Now team, let's see who kills more. You're on dope. In the end, the invading force of Kiri, Kumo and Konoha shinobi retreated with heavy losses. Mainly because 2 shinobi calling out the number they had each time they killed one of them. The score was Naruto 172, Sasuke 43. It was a landslide victory, though it wasn't really fair. I mean he was using Hiraishin. Flashback end. Shaking that memory off, she turned to Tenchi. Can we stay here for the night, Tenchi-kun? He looked down at her and was about to say no when he noticed the puppy-eyed look on her face, and it was enhanced drastically due to her being Gobi's Jinchuriki. He tried to resist it, but couldn't help but cave in as the look was just too overpowering. Alright. We'll stay the night. Aisha smiled brightly before she started to skip in front of him, making the teen sigh. Damn it. I know I shouldn't be doing this. I'm going to get screwed tonight. From within him a large smirk was seen on Shichibi's face. Though he didn't know how close to the truth he was. It was early in the afternoon and Itachi and Naruto had reached the Konoha side of the town. They would have reached there earlier, but certain things slowed down their progress. The reason it took so long was the fact that Naruto had pulled a few pranks on the now smirking Uchiha, but he got his revenge. Naruto on the other was scowling as he rubbed his butt. I swear. When I find the person that invented that technique, I'm going to give them the modified K's Rasen Shuriken version of it. Of course he was talking about the most powerful move in Konoha's archives. The Senin Garashi. Shaking his head after mumbling a few choice cuss words, he looked up and recognized the town. He smiled lightly when Kyuubi spoke up. Alright kid. She's somewhere in this town. I liked it better when it was rubble. Naruto twitched at the last statement. Kyuubi. You want everything to be rubble. The giant kitsune shrugged. True, but alas it's not meant to be. Unless you've decided to accept my proposal. He spoke gleefully at the end. Naruto's twitching began to increase. Fox. I'm not going to become like Gaara was. So stop asking. Kyuubi mentally pouted. Fine then, take my fun away. Just remember that it's always a possibility. Coo. Naruto rolled his eyes as he ignored the kitsune. He turned to Itachi who was drooling heavily. Blinking in confusion, he looked around until he found what it was causing Itachi's state. The Pocky stand. He could only restrain himself from sweat dropping at the scene when Itachi grabbed him and dragged him to the stand. Naruto sighed as there was no way to stop him. No. He was a man possessed by Pocky. 20 minutes and 45 ceiling scrolls later, they finally left the stand with a very, very happy Uchiha prodigy. Naruto could only shake his head. He swore he never seen anything like it before. Apparently he never paid too much attention to himself as he had a very similar addiction himself. Shaking his head off that thought. He turned back to the happy Uchiha. Well, as I was trying to say before, you were hypnotized and spent all our money on your Pocky. Kaisha-chan is here as Kyuubi consents Gobi. Itachi nodded as he pulled out a blueberry-flavored stick and started munching on it. Alright. I'm figuring your plan is going to happen at night. Naruto nodded, making him smirk wickedly. Naruto paled at this and was thinking of flaring Kyuubi's yaki right now to get away from the lunatic in front of him. Then in the meantime, I'm going to be training you. Naruto could only gulp. He was sure that this wasn't going to fun. In fact he was pretty sure he was going to be needing Kyuubi's yaki by the end of this, seeing Itachi's grin grow. May Kami have mercy on his soul. The sun had set a few hours ago and Kaisha was waiting patiently in their hotel room. She knew that she had to wait till Tenchi was distracted to make her getaway, yet he seemed to be expecting her to do it. Of course he was put on guard since she was being patient and she was never patient. He knew he was being paranoid, but he knew something bad was going to happen tonight, he just didn't know what. Shaking that off, he wondered why Shichibi had been so quiet of lately. The normally annoying as hell Biju hadn't said a word since he mentioned eating beaver stew. Now this wasn't too odd, but Shichibi could never be quiet for too long, unless sleeping, and he knew it wasn't sleeping. It's planning something. I know it. The damned beaver has never stayed quite this long for any reason. From within him, Shichibi just smirked to itself as Tenchi mentally was prepared for it to pop out and do something. Which is was it wanted exactly. Shichibi's plan was simple, make Tenchi worry so much about it that he would take his attention of Kaisha so she could escape. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but that was what its backup plan was for. And if that didn't work, then well, it had no clue. Aisha watched the TV, which had a boring anime that she had seen every episode to, even though this was technically a brand new episode to them. She noticed Tenchi being off edge and knew it was Shichibi that was causing it, just didn't know how, nor did she want to. She kept a stern eye on him as she faked watching Evangelion. Suddenly, Gobi spoke from within her. "Child. It's almost time." Aisha mentally nodded at her tenant as she stood up and walked to the bathroom. Tenchi looked at her oddly, but shook his head as he wasn't really interested to keep watch on a 7-year-old girl going to the restroom. Shaking that disturbing thought out of his head, he turned to the window and looked outside, sensing was off. It wasn't that Kaisha trying to ditch him over and over again or the fact that Shichibi was being unusually quiet. It was something else, a familiar presence. One he hadn't felt in a few years yet he could quite place it. Sighing, he looked out to the moon as it was somewhat calming to him. Though he didn't understand why a Shichibi was a beaver, it would have made more sense for a forest to calm him down, but he wasn't complaining. He took a deep breath to calm himself down, as he was sure that nothing bad would happen and he was just being a worrywart. That's when his vision went pitch black and he found himself in front of a caged beaver. Its cage bars wasn't anywhere near as strong as Kyuubi, but strong enough to keep Shichibi from breaking through. Except there was one problem with this picture. The bars were behind him. Swearing out loud at his horrible luck, he started to slowly back up. Shichibi noticed this and smirked devilishly at him. "Oh, Tenchi-kun. Where do you think you're going?" Not thinking twice about it, Tenchi turned his back to the Bijuu and rushed out of the cage. Well, tried to. One of Shichibi's tails wrapped around him quickly and dragged his screaming form back inside the cage. "TSK, TSK, TSK Tenchi-kun. Are you trying to run away from me when I'm trying to show you something?" Tenchi, not being sure on what to do, nodded slightly as it was the truth before closing his eyes as the tail wrapped around him tightly. Expecting himself to be crushed, he was expecting to be put back on the ground and released. And he was certainly not expecting to hear a feminine laughter. Quickly opening his eyes, he saw something he wasn't expecting. In front of him was a 27-year-old woman with dark brown, almost black shoulder-length hair with two larger than normal front teeth. She had hazel-colored eyes with dilated onyx-colored iris in each eye. She stood a little under 6 foot with an athletic figure and larger breast than he had ever seen, and he'd seen pictures of Tsunade in the bingo book. Though, he tried not to look at those, but found it hard not to. Because it was hard not to stare at a naked woman, especially when she wasn't trying to hide it. She smirked happily at him before placing her hands on his shoulders. "This is what I want to show you, Tenchi-kun." Suddenly everything began to crash down on Tenchi as he realized who this was. It was none other than Shichibi. That was all his brain could handle and a stream of blood shot out of his noise, rocketing him into the bar behind him, knocking him out cold. Shichibi's sweat dropped at the scene before shaking her head. "Well, didn't expect it to be that easy. I swear all men are perverts." From within the bathroom, Kaisha sensed Tenchi crumble to the floor and was about to go check up on him when Gobi stopped her. "Child. Go now. That's the distraction." "One hell of one as well, I'm pretty sure I would have fallen for that." Aisha's eyes widened in realization before she bolted it out of the bathroom and into the lobby before heading outside and began following Gobi's directions. "I'm almost there, Naru-kun. Just wait a little more." From a building not too far away, a figure with long blonde hair smirked as they saw the young girl rushing towards her destination. The person's hands twitched in excitement as they thought about the revenge that he could get on his old rival. Oh, this was going to be the perfect way to extract his revenge. Naruto slowly made his way back into the town with Itachi not too far behind him as Kyuubi sent Yaki into his system, not to alert Kaisha and Gobi, but to heal all the burn, cuts and scrapes covering the poor boy. The young boy grumbled as he looked back at the somewhat pleasant-looking Uchiha. Itachi's training didn't seem so hard at first as he had him practicing tree walking. He was getting the hang of it pretty quickly as his chakra reserve weren't as large as it was when he tried this when he was a genin, but still pretty difficult as he could only get 20 feet up. But that wasn't the hard part. Oh no. The hard part was when Itachi started throwing kunai at him, seeing if he could keep his control under pressure. Needless to say, he fell to the ground and got cut a few times. Just as soon as he managed to start dodging the kunais every now and then, Itachi upped the ante by using Kaiten. Hasenka sending dozens of controlled fireballs at him. So Naruto wasn't in the best of conditions as of right now. In fact, he was pretty sure this was worse than some of his beatings he had when he was younger. At least he was lucky that Itachi had called it quits when the sun started to set. The only bright spot for him during the training was that he was pretty sure he could use Kaiten. Hasenka from watching Itachi doing it so much. Itachi was impressed, but he wouldn't dare show it. He had done a little worse than he had when his father had put him through the same training. Then again, he had his Sharingan activated during the exercise, so he knew where the kunai and fireballs were going to be. Naruto didn't have that advantage, so he was impressed at the display. Then he remembered Naruto was older than his body showed. He had the knowledge of what to do, but executing it in a young, much different body was more difficult. Sighing in resignation, he followed behind Naruto, watching the slight injuries, in his opinion, that he gave him heal. It was unnerving, yet fascinating seeing the red yaki wisp around the wounds and slowly stitched up the cuts and shedded the dead skin from the burns before replacing it with new, unblemished skin. Now normally unblemished skin would be the signs of a novice shinobi, making the enemy drop their guard a bit, but with Naruto, it was another advantage he could exploit, even if only for a moment. Because a moment in the shinobi world was all you needed to kill someone. Shaking that thought off, he turned back to a completely healed Naruto, who was currently holding out Gamma-chan and counting his Ryo. His eyes nearly bulged out of his socket seeing just how much it was. What the hell? How does he have that much? That's more than I get on an A rank assassination and a B rank guarding mission combined. Ignoring the shocked look on Itachi's face, he continuing his Ryo as he noticed a Raymond stand and was going to get him a few bowls when he noticed an object in the sky, but paid no heed to it as he figured it was a large bird. Walking to the stand with a shell-shocked prodigy behind him, he paid for 3 bowls of miso for himself and 1 beef for the gaping Uchiha. His thoughts turned to Kaisha as he waited for the bowls to be served. As his thoughts roamed, Itachi managed to regain his composure. The said Uchiha noticed Naruto had a far-off look in his eyes and shook his head as the stand owner served them their bowls. Flashback, Naruto smiled lightly at Choji as he chowed down on another plate of barbecue before he guzzled down 3 bowls of ramen within a flash of an eye. Tenten blinked in surprise as she looked at the 2 food-eating machines. Where in the hell do they put it all? I mean, this is Choji's 10th plate while Naruto is on his 13th bowl. Not even Lee can eat this fast when he challenges Sasuke to an eating contest. As Tenten tried to figure out where both of them put it all, which was harder to do with Naruto as he hadn't had an ounce of fat on him since he was a genin, Shizune shook her head as she called the waitress over and asked for the bill. When the waitress handed her the bill, a large bead of sweat rolled off the back of her head. 12,000 Ryo. That's it. This is the last time I'm taking Naruto and Choji out to eat together. While Shizune screamed her head off mentally at the price of the bill, Choji and Naruto had finished their final plates, making both Ino and Temari slightly grateful as they had lost their appetite during the competition they had going. Shino looked stoically at them, but inside his bugs were raving, trying hard to figure out the same question Tenten was. This makes no logical sense. Neither of them should be able to hold more than 2, maybe 3 servings in Choji's case. I can understand Choji as he eats constantly, but Naruto has barely been able to eat without going hunting for himself due to Sakura's law. And now she's just past one where he can't hunt. Just what happened between you and her, Naruto? Naruto rubbed his belly happily before burping and covering his mouth. Sorry, it was just that good. Choji smiled at his eating partner as he could tell his complexion was considerably brighter compared to what it was before they took him out to eat. Both Temari and Ino smiled a bit and nodded at Naruto, not caring about the laws. Shino nodded lightly at him as Shizune smiled sadly at her adopted brother. Tenten wasn't the only one to give an initial reaction, but that was due to her still trying to figure out where they put it all and how the hell Shizune was going to pay for all this. Smiling a bit more at them, Naruto stretched a bit before standing up. Well, I better get out of here before I get you guys in trouble. Take care. They all smiled at Naruto before saying their goodbyes as he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Once he did and everyone pitched in to pay the bill so Shizune would have to pay off a debt to the owner, they all began to head out of the dinner when they were surrounded by 3 5-man Anbu squads. The new Anbu captain that took the place of Yamato when he stepped down to train Team 7 spoke up. The 6 of you are charged for breaking the laws of the Rakudame Hokage and hereby to be immediately executed for your treasonous actions. All 6 of them narrowed their eyes and pulled prepared for battle as they might be outmatched, but they weren't going out without a fight. Naruto had cloaked himself in an invisibility jutsu to keep people from seeing him as he jumped rooftop to rooftop as he didn't want to deal with them right now as he was worried. His friends and family had practically dragged him from his apartment as he hadn't been able to eat for a week due to Sakura's newest law. He was happy that he had such close friends that they would risk putting their lives in danger for him, but it also worried him deeply as he felt that they were being watched the entire time. He just couldn't help but shake that feeling as it became stronger and stronger. Damn it. I have to check and make sure they're okay. Quickly changing directions, he headed towards the dinner as he figured everyone would be saying their goodbyes to each other before separating. As he got closer and closer, he could feel all of them still there, but something was off. They seemed weaker than normal. In fact, all of them seemed to be on the verge of. His eyes widened as he pushed as much chakra into his legs and rushed towards them with one thought on his mind. Please be okay. Please be okay. Just let this be a figment of my imagination. Naruto's speed seemed to increase even further as he rushed towards their fading signatures and even let his ninjutsu drop, not caring if people spotted him now. Of course most Chunin probably couldn't see him move at the speed he was going at, but it made little difference as he arrived at the dinner and was routed to the spot as his blood chilled. Shino and Tamari were both panting heavily, with the other leaning against the other's back as bruises, cuts and gashes covered their bodies. But this wasn't what made Naruto's blood cold. It was the fact that his other 4 friends were lying on the ground in their own blood pools. Daoji he looked at the enlarged young man as he laid on the ground with a dozen kunai in his back and one that severed his spinal cord from his head. Memories of the 2 of them along with Shikamaru and Kiba skipping classes and the 2 of them having ramen eating contest began to flood his mind. Ino looking over towards her skinny form, he nearly vomited as her good looks were gone, as her body was covered in burns and gashes and nothing but a few strands of her pale blonde hair were left. He didn't have many fond memories between both of them, but as of recently the 2 of them had become close friends. Denton the weapons mistress body laid beside Ino as it seemed that she had tried to protect her in the dying minutes as she was covered in burns and gashes as well. The few memories of the 2 of them together flooded his mind as he remembered having to help her get over her breakup with Niji. He finally turned to last and final figured and his body began trembling in rage. Shizune-chan. Compared to hers, the others didn't look half bad. Almost every inch of her skin had been cut, making it seem like she went through a blender. Both of her arms were snapped, most likely to keep her from doing medical jutsu to help the others. Her skin was charred on a level that made Ino and Tenten's burns look like they were nothing. She had dozens of kunai embedded into her, front and back, and even one right between the eyes. Not thinking twice, Naruto jumped down between Shino and Tamari and the remaining 5 members of the Anbu squad sent to execute them. Both the bug user and the wind mistress's eyes widened seeing this and were about to yell at Naruto when the Anbu captain spoke up again, seemingly unharmed from the entire encounter, probably since he didn't get involved other for the death blows. It seems like the demon decides to show himself again and in aid of his friends. How heroically noble of you. But it seems you're too late. He emphasized his point by kicking Shizune's already desecrated body. He would live to regret doing that for the final 2 seconds of his life. Soon as Naruto had seen the motion to kick his deceased foster sister's body, his anger, his rage, his primal fury rose beyond his threshold as his hands quickly slipped into his pouch. Hiro Sennin's wishes be damned. He wasn't holding back any longer. In an instant, 2 kunai flew towards the Anbu captain and embedded into the ground on both sides. He would have tried to make fun of Naruto's aim seeing how he missed when he noticed a streak of golden light where the blonde-haired Jinchuriki should have been. He wasn't able to think much after seeing this strange light as blood erupted from a gash in his neck. The other 4 Anbu, along with other spectators' eyes, had nearly bulged out of their sockets as they could recognize the technique from anywhere. It was the same that had made the Yondaime Hokage a legend. Duration. Before the other Anbu had time to recover, 3 more fell as blood gushed from their necks. The last one back up and fried as he stared at the blonde-haired Jinchuriki being covered in the blood from his fellow comrades. Somewhere deep in his mind, it clicked that they had been wrong the entire time and had forced the team to this point. He didn't get much time to ponder this as the chirping of 1,000 birds was heard before a hand punctured his chest, leaving him heartless. The hand removed itself as the body slumped to the ground, revealing its owner had a calm face and spiky, yet smooth raven-colored hair. Another man with gravity-defying silver hair walked up behind him. Naruto instantly recognized him and the man walking behind him with a hit I-8 covering his forehead protector, but it was different than normal. It had a scratch through the Konoha leaf. Sasuke Kakashi-sensei, what's going on? Kakashi showed no visible emotion as he checked the pulse on Choji, seeing if there was a chance that he was alive, but to no avail. Closing his one visible eye, he slowly turned to Naruto and answered him. We are leaving this village and we are taking you and everyone we can with us. The young Jinchuriki's eyes widened hearing this and looked from him to Sasuke and back again before nodding slowly as he knew he was no longer welcomed in this village. Kakashi nodded as he created 2 cage buncheons and had them pick up the Shino and Tamari as they were too worn out to leave on their own power. Alright then, Guy, Kurenai and Anko and whoever else they managed to get should be waiting for us. Let's go. Both Naruto and Sasuke nodded as they followed their Jounin sensei out of the village without any reasons, mainly because Kotetsu and Izuma were some of the ones heading towards Suna. Sakura grumbled as she worked her way through the paperwork on her desk. She should have told Tsunade to shove it when she declared her the Rockudame. That way, she wouldn't have to deal with all this paperwork. What the hell? Tsunade-sama and Sandaime-sama never had to do this much paperwork before. Why am I forced to do all this? Little did she know that this was Hamura and Kaharu's work as they had strongly protested her becoming the Hokage and decided to give her their paperwork as well. And if she did know, there was little she could do as they weren't doing anything illegal. The maximum punishment they could get was the paperwork thrown back at them. She growled a bit more as she heard someone rush through the door and was about to punch them through the wall when she noticed it was a panicking Chunin gibbering away at something she couldn't quite understand. A tick mark developed on her forehead as the man continued and she didn't hear a single word of it. Refrain from bashing his skull in, she spoke out in a polite tone. Slow down. I didn't understand a word you said. Now what happened? The Chunin blinked at her for a few minutes like she was crazy, but the irritated look on her face told him to speak. Sakura-sama. The demon just slaughtered 4 Anbu as Sasuke-sama killed another before the 2 of them along with Kakashi-san left the village carrying 2 of the traitor that you had ordered to be executed. Sakura's eyes widen in disbelief hearing this, along with Kaharu and Homura, as they watched with through the all-seeing ball Sarutobi gave them. She honestly believed Naruto wouldn't fight back until he rotted away, but her eyes quickly narrowed. How was it that all of them were able to get out so easily? Just then, another Chunin ran into the room panting for breath. Sakura quickly stood up as she looked at him, using the desk as a crutch as she looked at the man. Once he regained his breath, the man spoke up with a panicked expression. Hokage-sama. Over half of our Jounins and a few genin have left the village. At this, Sakura's eyes widened and nearly bulged out of her head. Half of the Jounins had abandoned the village. If that was true, they were in trouble. Other villages heard this. Plus it would explain how Naruto, Kakashi and Sasuke had gotten out of the village so easily. She gritted her teeth in anger as she punched her desk, shattering it in half and sending it to the room below. Gather everyone that is left and call them here. Now. The 2 Chunin nodded and fried and rushed off, not wanting to stick around as the pink-haired Hokage was oozing killer intent like it was nothing. She quickly turned around and looked over her village and gritted her teeth. I should have known. I bet he was planning this from the start. I swear I will kill you for this, Uzumaki Naruto. Having seen the whole thing via crystal ball, both Homura and Kaharu quickly disappeared in a swirl of leaves to join the leaving shinobi population. Flashback end. Dealing a nudge to the side, Naruto saw the bowls had been served and quickly polished his bowl off as Itachi finished his single bowl in the same amount of time. Stretching out a bit as he jumped off the seat, Naruto looked around and noticed there was a lack of people up, which was strange due to this being a pretty big town. Shaking that thought off, he and Itachi started to head towards their hotel when Kyuubi spoke up. Kid. It's time. Naruto's eyes widened as he felt Kyuubi's Yaki flare into his system almost soon as he said that and a light sheet of it surround him. Itachi jumped back in surprise at the sudden outburst and was ready to fight, but noticed Naruto's eyes were still blue and had nothing to fear as he slid his wakizashi back into its sheath. Guess it's time then. Naruto nodded at Itachi's statement and was about to take off when he was interrupted. Alright, I'll come with you, just to make sure this isn't a trap. Naruto nodded again and headed off towards the direction Kyuubi was leading him to. Itachi quickly followed, yet kept a good distance away as he didn't want to alert anyone else of his presences. Like Tenshi, he could feel something was off and he wanted to know what it was. His Sharingan eyes searched around as he silently followed Naruto. Nearby, Kaisha was rushing towards Naruto's position. She no longer needed Gobi's directioning as she could sense both Naruto and Kyuubi's Yaki as they were close. Sending her chakra and Yaki to her legs, she jumped up onto the building in front of her before she continued running towards where she felt him until she felt someone grab her shoulder. She jerked around to see a bemused Tenshi with a cotton ball in his nose to stop the bleeding. Her eyes widened as she struggled against his grip and tried to call upon more of Gobi's Yaki, but was denied since her body couldn't handle it. Tenshi narrowed his eyes as he noticed her continuing struggling and was thanking Shichibi for that short rest as it allowed him to recover a bit. Kaisha, you are not crossing the border, and that's final. Aisha growled loudly at him before biting down on his wrist with her enlarged canines. If Tenshi wasn't a shinobi, he would have released his grip as it seemed like he was bitten by a wolf out for flesh. But instead of releasing, he just held her tightly while allowing her to slash and kick him as he held on to her. The reason why he tried to knock her out was due to the fact that his other hand was grabbing her ankle as she tried to kick his jewels. She continued struggling against him, but it seemed useless as she couldn't get free. After a few moments of resistance and a firm knee to her gut, Gobi's Yaki left her as she had used all of it. She slumped down to her knees as she panted for breath before looking up at Tenshi as he spoke. Are you done? Cause if not, we are going home. Aisha growled at him, though due to her lack of air, it wasn't very intimidating. I hate you. Tenshi flinched at her words, but paid them no heed for now. He was tired with everything that had happened on this short trip. He grabbed her wrist and was about to drag her with him when he noticed something red out of the corner of his eye. His eyes widened when he sensed Yaki nearby and looked around for it. Taking this advantage, Kaisha stood up and brought her foot straight up into his jewels. It didn't matter that he was a shinobi, no man could stand up to a chakra-empowered kick to the groin. As soon as he doubled over, Kaisha jumped over next building, crossing the border between the two lands. Now inside her head, she knew Tenshi would follow her as he would not to tell her father that he had lost her. But she didn't care at the moment. All she cared about was the boy in front of her as the red Yaki faded around him. Naru-kun. Aisha-chan. Both smiled lightly at each other as they stared for a few moments before rushing over and embracing the other. The two held each other tightly for a few moments before Naruto moved in and kissed her on the lips. She kissed him back quickly as her hands wrapped around his waist tightly. After a moment or two, they broke their kiss and smiled lightly at the other. After a few moments of silence, Naruto was the first to break it as he hugged her tightly again. "I thought I lost you. I'm sorry for not being able to stop him. If I had." She placed a finger at his lips and pushed him back a bit before hugging him lightly. "I know. I thought I lost you as well, but now we're here." Naruto nodded lightly as he held her tightly to him as he rubbed the back of head. He smiled lightly as she buried her head into his chest. From within them both Kyuubi and Gobi rolled their eyes and quickly fell asleep as their jobs were done. Getting up from being kicked in his manhood, Tenchi looked across the building and watched the scene strangely. It was kind of heartwarming, yet at the same time he didn't understand it at all. From within him, Shichibi sighed in annoyance. Her container never listened to her, and 9 out of 10 times, she knew exactly what was going on. Not too far away, Itachi refrained from smiling as he saw the scene. From the little that he saw of her from Naruto's memories, she was probably the person that he held more precious than anyone else. Then suddenly he caught a surge of chakra and a small object closing in towards the two children. Naruto smiled lightly as he separated from Kaisha. "So, are we going to Iwa or Konoha?" Kaisha looked up at him before thinking about it. On one hand, everyone loved her in Iwa and would treat Naruto with respect as long as they didn't find out he was the Yandame's son. The downside was that she knew in the future there would be assassination attempts on him from her suitors and shinobi from Konoha sent by the hateful members of Konoha's council. Plus, her father wouldn't want her to be wedded from Konoha, civilian or shinobi. On the other side, if they went to go to Konoha, they would both have to endure the treatment Naruto had gone through his entire life. On the plus side, she wouldn't have to deal with many suitors as most people wouldn't know who she was and they would be protected by Anbu from any attacks on them till they became shinobi. After a minute of thinking, she looked back up at him and gave Naruto her answer. "Naruto, let's go. What's wrong?" She didn't have time to answer as Naruto grabbed her as a small clay bird flew towards them. What if Rookie 9 is protective of Naruto council bashing? Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.